Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. Under the gaze of the clan members, he slowly said, "We just received news from the front lines. The Hidden Mist village forces are retreating en masse from the Land of Fire. This war might end soon." The war is ending? The Uchiha ninjas were momentarily stunned before one said, "The war has only been going on for a few months, and we haven't even fully engaged. Why is it ending so suddenly?" "We didn't expect it either," Fugaku replied. But according to Choza Akimaki, a member of Tobirama's guard platoon, it seems there's an issue with Hidden Mist Village's 3 tails, leaving them with only 1 Jinchuriki. Combined with the recent disastrous defeat of the 7 ninja swordsmen and the arrival of the Yellow Flash, Hidden Mist Village appears to be in chaos and unable to continue the war. After hearing Fugaku's explanation, some Uchiha felt happy while others were disappointed. The Uchiha cherished peace, but their battle-hardened blood made them crave war. Moreover, without earning significant merit on the battlefield, it would be incredibly difficult for the Uchiha to become Hokage. However, the sense of regret didn't last long as the Uchiha ninjas started a new round of discussions. Even without the Naka Shrine, as long as there was a sufficiently large space, the Uchiha could gather and hold clan meetings. The topic this time remained centered on how to campaign for the position of Hokage. Initially, Shizue listened with interest, but he soon grew bored. The clan meeting was filled with the same complaints repeated over and over, with no productive solutions ever being discussed. The clan members never seemed to think about solving problems, always venting and complaining instead. For some reason, Shizue felt that his clan members' image closely matched what Byakuya had described. Could Byakuya be right? Was it true that the Uchiha could never become Hokage? A few days later, orders arrived at the front camp for the Uchiha to return to the village. Although the Uchiha were somewhat dissatisfied with the orders, they still led the team back to Hidden Leaf Village. Only by returning to the village could Fugaku participate in the Hokage election. On the way back, Shizue was approached by Itachi. Among the many Uchiha, Shizue was the youngest, with less than a 10-year age difference from Itachi. Itachi was very curious about Shizue's demeanor, feeling that he, like himself, was out of sync with the world. "Shizue-senpai, can I talk to you?" Itachi asked cautiously, seemingly afraid of being rejected by Shizue. Shizue nodded gently as he also wanted to talk to Itachi as well. "I also wanted to talk to you. What do you want to discuss? Are you looking for advice on ninjutsu or shuriken techniques?" "No, it's not that." Itachi shook his head. Shizue became interested and looked at Itachi, asking, "Then what do you want to know?" "If it's about how to awaken the Sharingan, I can't tell you that. The Sharingan can only be awakened by oneself. No one else can help." Itachi shook his head again and then said, "It's none of those. It's something else. Actually, I want to know what the meaning of life is. Why do ninjas kill each other? People die when they are killed, so why do we have to kill each other? Moreover, since people are destined to die after being born, why do we live at all? I can't seem to find any meaning in it. It feels like living and dying are the same, and sometimes I don't even know why I'm still alive." Hearing Itachi's words, Shizue suddenly felt a bit scared and began to understand Byakuya. Byakuya had shown a look of disdain and mockery upon hearing Shizue's responses, his eyes seeming to say that the Uchiha were all a bit insane. At that time, Shizue had dismissed Byakuya's words, thinking he was merely demeaning the Uchiha. But Itachi's doubts were indeed thoughts no 4 or 5-year-old should have. The notion of suicide should never be mentioned lightly, living was already hard enough. After contemplating for a while, Shizue spoke earnestly, "Birth and death may hold no meaning, but experiencing life in between is the greatest significance. When you attend the Ninja Academy and understand the will of fire, you will find the meaning of your existence." "Really?" Itachi asked with an innocent smile. Faced with Itachi's question, Shizue hesitated a bit. Unlike when he faced Byakuya, he felt confident when addressing Itachi, who was still mentally immature. With this in mind, Shizue nodded solemnly. "Itachi, I would never lie to you. At the front of the group, Fugaku noticed Shizue and Itachi talking quietly but didn't pay much attention to their conversation. Although Shizue was the clan's youngest 3 Tomoe Sharingan user, his experience was still that of a child. As for Itachi, he hadn't even attended the Ninja Academy yet and knew very little. However, Fugaku was confident about Itachi's future. With his talent, Itachi was sure to become an elite Jonin and might even surpass Madara Uchiha, becoming the strongest Uchiha and the village's future Hokage. If possible, Fugaku hoped Itachi would become the son of a Hokage, creating a prestigious lineage of double Hokages. Unfortunately, Fugaku's own luck wasn't great. Against the likes of the Sannin and Minato no Mikage, his chances of becoming Hokage were slim. If he lost to the Sannin or Minato, he wouldn't complain. It was true his abilities and credentials were inferior. However, just having the experience of running for Hokage would make it easier for him to become an advisor elder in the future, thus entering the village's core leadership. The position of police force captain was respectable, but it was always limited by the Hokage's office. Gaining a position within the Hokage's office could improve the unfavorable circumstances for the Uchiha. Chapter 110, 2 Factions with No Chance of Becoming Hokage. A few days later, Fugaku walked out of the Hokage building with a somber expression. During the high-level meeting to nominate the 4th Hokage, the 3rd Hokage nominated Minato no Mikage, while Denzo recommended Orochimaru. The other advisors also nominated their preferred candidates. But the Uchiha clan wasn't even considered for a nomination, which made Fugaku Uchiha very displeased. He knew that the Uchiha's chances of being elected as the 4th Hokage were slim, but to not even be given the opportunity to participate in the election was too much. This wasn't the first time the Uchiha had been excluded from a Hokage nomination. Ever since Madara Uchiha failed to become Hokage, the Uchiha had not been nominated again. Nearly 50 years had passed since then. After returning to the Uchiha compound, Fugaku announced this matter during a meeting at the Naka Shrine. Upon hearing that the Uchiha had once again been excluded from the Hokage nomination, the gathered members of the Uchiha clan erupted in anger, with complaints about the unfairness of the leadership echoing throughout the room. They, too, found it hard to accept this powerless reality. But this was the reality. The Uchiha were not only far from becoming Hokage, they didn't even have the qualification to run for the position. The Uchiha clan, after all, boasted over a dozen Jonin and hundreds of elite ninjas. In terms of strength, they were not inferior to any other clan. The actions of the leadership were indeed excessive. Captain Fugaku, the leadership's actions are too much. We must make them pay. Captain Fugaku, if we were to make one of the candidates have an accident, wouldn't we gain the qualification to run for Hokage? When these words were suddenly uttered from the crowd, every Uchiha froze and turned to look at the speaker. The Uchiha had considered running for Hokage and had even openly challenged the leadership. However, that particular Uchiha elder had ultimately been imprisoned by the 2nd Hokage. But they had never considered attacking a Hokage candidate. The pride of the Uchiha would not allow them to plot such schemes in the shadows. They preferred to face their enemies head-on, to achieve victory honorably with their strength. Fugaku glanced at the Uchiha who had spoken, his expression stern as he said, "The ninjas of the village are our comrades. We, the Uchiha, intend to become Hokage openly and fairly. We absolutely cannot resort to such tactics." At this, the Uchiha member muttered quietly, "But we didn't get nominated. If the position of Hokage is always held by someone from the Senju line, we'll never have the chance to become Hokage. They won't even give us an opportunity." Fugaku's expression changed, but he still scolded him harshly. While the speaker may not have meant much by it, his words sparked a new hope in the hearts of many Uchiha. If they couldn't run for Hokage, perhaps they could take a different path and initiate a coup against the leadership. Becoming Hokage through a coup would still make them Hokage. However, the strength of the Hokage faction was currently too overwhelming. Even if they had the idea, it was merely that, an idea. It would be difficult to put it into action. In a corner, Shizue quietly listened to the content of the clan meeting. On the surface, Shizue appeared emotionless, but inside, he recalled something Byakuya had once said, getting too close to the position of Hokage would bring misfortune to the Uchiha, and eventually, the clan would be destroyed because of the Hokage. Whether the Uchiha would truly face destruction due to the Hokage was something Shizue couldn't be sure of. But what he could see now was that his clansmen were indeed developing dangerous thoughts because of their desire for the Hokage position. Things were progressing in the exact direction Byakuya had predicted, which left Shizue feeling deeply anxious yet powerless to change anything. A few days later, a meeting of all Jonin was convened at the Hokage building to begin the election for the 4th Hokage. Only 2 ninja qualified and chose to participate in the Hokage election, Minato no Mikage, who had gained great renown during the war against Hidden Stones Village, and Orochimaru, who had achieved extraordinary feats in the Battle of Kikyo Pass. Of the remaining qualified candidates, Jiraiya voluntarily withdrew from the race, while Tsunade had left the village and did not participate. After a brief introduction by the candidates, the election for the fourth Hokage officially began. The Jonin of Hidden Leaf Village expected a fierce competition between Orochimaru and Minato no Mikaze, perhaps even a close contest. However, the voting results shocked everyone. Minato no Mikaze won by an overwhelming majority, almost crushing Orochimaru, and was declared the fourth Hokage of Hidden Leaf Village. The outcome surprised all the Jonin present. After all, although Orochimaru was known for his cold demeanor, he was actually well respected in the village, considered a capable and responsible leader. After his defeat, Orochimaru walked off the stage without any expression on his face, heading directly towards the root base. Denzo, standing nearby, shot a fierce glance at both Minato no Mikaze and the third Hokage on stage before following closely behind Orochimaru, disappearing into the crowd. Once inside the root base, Orochimaru remained silent, as if the Hokage position was of no concern to him, certainly not more important than the experiments he was about to conduct. Denzo, however, was far from pleased. He glanced at Orochimaru and remarked with dissatisfaction, "Orochimaru, Hiruzen must have rigged the voting results. With your track record, there's no way you should have lost by such a wide margin to Minato no Mikaze. He deliberately kept you from becoming Hokage. How could that brat Minato no Mikaze possibly handle the role of Hokage? In the end, it'll just be Hiruzen again, wielding power under the guise of advising the fourth Hokage." Hearing Denzo's words, Orochimaru quietly set down his test tube. Though his face remained impassive, inside, Orochimaru was far from calm. The loss in the Hokage election infuriated him, but he wasn't one to wear his emotions on his sleeve. "I'm not particularly interested in the Hokage position, but my teacher did go a bit too far this time." Orochimaru's thoughts were simple: he didn't need to be Hokage, but the position shouldn't be denied to him through underhanded means. After a pause, Orochimaru continued, "I'll let it slide this time for my teacher's sake. But Lord Denzo, I believe Minato no Mikaze's ambitions are not small. He won't easily let the teacher control him. If the successor personally chosen by my teacher ends up becoming his political adversary, that would certainly be interesting." While Orochimaru seemed indifferent to the Hokage position, Denzo felt very differently. Denzo had supported Orochimaru's candidacy for Hokage precisely because Orochimaru lacked true interest in the position. If Orochimaru had been elected, Denzo would have effectively become the Hokage himself, controlling Orochimaru from behind the scenes. He had 100 ways to ensure Orochimaru would obediently become a mere rubber stamp. Unfortunately, the election had still ended in failure. Feeling frustrated, Denzo brushed aside the topic of the Hokage and turned his attention to the surrounding experimental subjects. "Orochimaru, how is the progress on the wood-style experiment? Have there been any successful subjects?" he asked. Orochimaru flicked out his forked tongue and then shook his head, replying, "The cells from the first Hokage are too overpowering. So far, no experimental subject has been able to withstand them. We need many more experiments to make any real progress." He continued, "The main issue is that the yang style energy within the cells is too abundant. We need yin style to balance it out." Denzo, uninterested in hearing the details of the experiment, cut him off. "How much longer will it take? If Hiruzen catches wind of this, he'll have another excuse to come after us. At most, 3 more experiments will yield the final results. You need to secure more subjects for the labs." Orochimaru replied, his expression remaining indifferent. He wasn't concerned with Denzo's worries, his only focus was on obtaining the necessary materials and funding for his experiments. Chapter 111, The Fourth Shadow. After staying in the land of rain for a few days, Kakazu finally adapted to life in the Akatsuki. Contrary to his expectation of daily missions involving murder and robbery, Byakuya spent his days wandering around, inspecting various enterprises while Kakazu acting as his prime bodyguard. But considering Byakuya's strength, did he really need a bodyguard? What was clear, though, was that Byakuya was indeed very wealthy, alleviating any concerns about payment. As long as Kakazu obediently followed Byakuya's orders, he would receive a substantial salary. At times, however, Kakazu felt uneasy about earning his salary without doing much and wished he could kill a few more people for Byakuya. Standing outside the Hidden Rain Village tower, Kakazu straightened his posture at this thought. Inside the Hidden Rain Village building, Byakuya sat in a recliner, looking at Yahiko and the others. He yawned out of boredom, waiting for others to speak. Since he became the leader of the Akatsuki while Yahiko became the leader of Hidden Rain Village, they had clear divisions of responsibility. "Yahiko, being gentle and willing to strictly implement the Akatsuki's will, was responsible for economic development and diplomatic work. Under his governance, the Land of Rain was well organized. Byakuya was responsible for military affairs, in a role similar to the head of Hidden Leaf Village's Anbu, overseeing espionage activities. Other tasks, such as training regular ninjas, building ninja schools, and infrastructure development, were handed over to Nagato and Conan, each responsible for a significant sector. On the 1st and 15th of every month, the four of them would gather to report on their work and discuss the future development plans for Hidden Rain Village. This past half-month, the infrastructure department completed the plan to build a road from Hidden Rain Village to the capital, but encountered difficulties with reservoir construction. "We need support from ninjas proficient in Earth style," reported Nagato. "The orphanage is as usual, with no incidents. However, the ninja school lacks qualified Chunin instructors. The ninjas you recommended are strong but too fierce, scaring the children," reported Conan. After their reports, both glanced at Yahiko before focusing their gaze on Byakuya. Feeling awkward under Conan and Nagato's stares, Byakuya said, "Why are you looking at me? Yahiko is the village leader. Ask the dear leader to solve your problems." Conan and Nagato remained expressionless, continuing to stare at Byakuya, as if saying, "Guess if we discussed it privately while you were away. If there were any results, would we delay solving it until now?" After a moment, Byakuya spoke with a look of resignation. "Understood. I have ninjas skilled in Earth style. I'll send them to support the water engineering project right away. But as for Chunin teachers, I really can't help. My subordinates are more adept at killing. If I sent them to teach at the ninja school, they might make the students more efficient killers than the ninjas from the sand or mist villages." Hearing this, Conan's expression shifted before she sighed. "Let's not do that. I don't want our new generation to become ninjas who only know how to kill. Their lives should be more colorful." Despite her words, Conan still looked at Byakuya with hopeful eyes. Byakuya sighed lightly. He had a golden finger for development, but now it seemed he had become the golden finger for Yahiko's trio, almost like Doraemon, a universal helper. After pondering for a moment, Byakuya suggested that Conan recruit some knowledgeable ordinary people to serve as teachers at the ninja school. In his previous life, he had never held a high position, so he wasn't sure how to properly develop an organization, a village, or a country. But he knew that a mercenary group like a ninja village was abnormal. Ninjas, with their superpowers mastering core productivity, shouldn't be used solely for killing. It was too extreme. During their time at the ninja school, ninjas didn't necessarily need to focus too much on combat abilities. Compared to shuriken throwing and the use of the three basic techniques, basic knowledge dissemination was more important, so that after graduation, they could be allocated to suitable positions. After all, training 1,000 Chunin cannon fodder couldn't compare to nurturing one Kage-level strongman. Moreover, chakra technology was advancing with the times. As long as the technology was adequate, even ordinary Geinin students could possess combat power comparable to Anbu ninjas. This was why he suggested Conan take charge of the ninja school and implement reforms there. After addressing Conan's question, Byakuya turned his gaze to Yahiko and said calmly, "Yahiko, did you get into any trouble in your work?" Yahiko shook his head slightly. "During this period, I didn't encounter any diplomatic troubles. Communication with other countries went very smoothly, and they agreed to trade and open their borders. Even some foreign envoys who wanted to cause trouble changed their minds after seeing Hanzo's puppet. Your idea of having Nagato create the puppet was indeed good. Hidden Rain Village still needs the deterrence of the demigod. Well, I'll be off then." Byakuya wasn't particularly interested in Yahiko's words and was about to leave the Hidden Rain Village tower when Yahiko slowly pulled out an intelligence report and said, "Recently, a few significant events have occurred in the ninja world that you all need to know about." Yahiko flipped some pages of the report before continuing. "The first is that Minato no Mikage has become the 4th Hokage. The second is that Yaguro has become the 4th Mizukage. In just 2 months, both Hidden Leaf Village and Hidden Mist Village have new leaders." "Is that all?" Byakuya was not surprised by Minato becoming the 4th Hokage. Although Orochimaru was a competitor, his sinister nature meant he could never win against Minato. Minato's achievements were no less than Orochimaru's, and his warm personality, coupled with the approval of the 3rd Hokage, ensured Orochimaru never had a chance. This situation was somewhat similar to the Uchiha's plight. The Uchiha didn't even have the qualification to run for Hokage. Denzo and his recommendations had the qualifications, but the outcome would always be the same. In a sense, both Denzo and the Uchiha were sore losers. Striving to become Hokage like moths to a flame, they were ultimately consumed by the will of fire. Denzo's Shimura clan and Sasuke's Uchiha clan both eventually vanished into history, barely making a ripple. However, Byakuya was somewhat surprised by the news of Yagura becoming the fourth Mizukage. It wasn't surprising that Yagura became Mizukage, but rather that it happened so early. Obito seemed to be active in Hidden Mist Village during this period, suggesting that Obito had a hand in this. Once Obito finished with Hidden Mist Village, he would likely turn his attention to Hidden Leaf Village. Another spectacle was about to unfold. Chapter 112, Kakazu's surprise. Yahiko was long accustomed to Byakuya's flippant remarks. Byakuya lacked sufficient respect for the demigod of Hidden Rain Village and even the Kage of the 5 great ninja villages. However, given Byakuya's displayed strength, he did have the right to be somewhat irreverent. After pondering for a moment, Yahiko continued, Minato is a disciple of Jiraiya-sensei, which technically makes him our senior. Now that he has become the 4th Hokage, I plan to send an envoy to congratulate him and also probe for the possibility of deeper cooperation. With that, Yahiko looked at Byakuya, waiting for his opinion. Byakuya nodded indifferently, saying, this minor matter can be handled by you, Yahiko. Cooperation between our village and Hidden Leaf Village is beneficial. At least, I don't oppose it. Byakuya, do you truly not oppose it? You are serious this time? Yahiko squinted his eyes, somewhat disbelieving. Other villagers might not know, but the few of them were aware of Byakuya's identity. Byakuya carried the Uzumaki clan's bloodline, one of the last ninjas of the clan. Unlike Nagato, who grew up in the Land of Rain, Byakuya still harbored thoughts about the Land of Whirlpools. When the Land of Whirlpools was destroyed, Hidden Leaf Village chose to stand by idly. Given this, it was almost impossible for Byakuya not to hold a grudge against Hidden Leaf Village. Byakuya sighed lightly, somewhat helplessly saying, the market in the Land of Rain is too small. Cooperating with a large nation like the Land of Fire is naturally beneficial. The ideals of the Akatsuki also need to be communicated externally to spread. Yahiko-senpai, have you forgotten our ideals since becoming the leader of Hidden Rain Village? Faced with Byakuya's soul-searching question, Yahiko found himself speechless. But wasn't this line supposed to be his? Why did it sound so strange coming from Byakuya? Konan and Nagato also wore peculiar expressions. Could it be that the ideals and will of the Akatsuki were some kind of inherent secret technique of the leader? Once one became the leader, they automatically acquired the relevant abilities. Nonetheless, this also indicated that Byakuya did not oppose cooperating with Hidden Leaf Village. At this moment, Byakuya seemed to notice their thoughts and continued, of course, my primary reason for not opposing it is that if we strengthen cooperation with Hidden Leaf Village, we can justifiably spread our ideals to neighboring countries without worrying about military interference from Hidden Leaf Village. I've had enough of the Hidden Grass Village next door, a bunch of fickle little people. We need to find a way to let them bask in the light of the Akatsuki's ideals. The familiar tone and words brought Yahiko, Konan, and Nagato back to reality. Byakuya was still Byakuya, with a strong sense of crisis, believing in preemptive strikes. All other reasons were just excuses. However, after experiencing so much, they understood that every village and organization needed such a ninja. The 5 great ninja villages may seem glamorous on the surface, but there's plenty of darkness beneath. They're not just truthless towards their own people but are also merciless towards the smaller neighboring countries. Even Yahiko, who believes in the ideals of the Akatsuki, has started to accept that not everyone can understand each other. Those who can understand each other are naturally allies, but someone like Denzo will never reciprocate genuine intentions, only using them to create conspiracies. Byakuya, hold on for a moment. Yahiko interrupted Byakuya and continued, I know you have grievances against the Land of Grass, but the timing isn't right. We haven't yet fully consolidated our control over the Land of Rain. Let's wait until we have enough strength before considering this. Yahiko actually didn't want to take action against the Hidden Grass Village but could only delay things like this. Otherwise, he suspected Byakuya might act on his own, executing a decapitation strike on Hidden Grass Village and forcing the Land of Rain to annex the Hidden Grass Village without proper justification. This would leave them vulnerable to subsequent public backlash. After all, the war between the Akatsuki and Hanzo was a civil war, whereas the Hidden Grass Village is an independent nation. The ninjas of the Land of Grass would find it hard to understand the ninjas of the Hidden Rain Village. This was the reality. In the subsequent meeting, the leadership of Hidden Rain Village continued their discussions. The core issues remained the reform of the ninja school and diplomatic relations with the 5 great ninja villages. This time, Byakuya took on the role of an observer, listening without speaking, quietly watching the trio's performance. After several months in high-level positions, they finally looked the part, shedding much of their former naivety. After leaving the Hidden Rain Village Tower, Byakuya received a message from Black Zetsu. Sending Shiro underground, Byakuya, accompanied by Kakazu, headed towards the Akatsuki base. Soon, they met Black Zetsu and Obito in the woods near the base. Black Zetsu's appearance was the same as before, a black and white, yin-yang humanoid. Obito's gaze had become sharper, and the tiger-striped mask on his face gave him an air of unfathomable depth, indicating a significant increase in both strength and confidence since their last meeting. He now exuded an attitude of, "I've been walking on thin ice all my life, can I really realize the Eye of the Moon project?" Kakazu also took note of the two, his instincts telling him they were both very powerful, on par with himself. Byakuya's Akatsuki organization was even more profound than he had imagined. Obito glanced at Kakazu and then asked Byakuya, "Who is he? A new member of the organization? Is he reliable? Will he leak our plans?" 3 rapid-fire questions left Byakuya momentarily speechless. "Masked man, correct your attitude." Byakuya frowned and coldly said, "This is Kakazu, an esteemed senior who has dominated the underground black markets of various countries for decades. He even battled the first Hokage for dozens of rounds and survived." Kakazu's expression shifted slightly. While it was true he boasted about surviving a fight with the first Hokage to inflate his value and secure more lucrative contracts, it wasn't meant to draw enmity in this context. Moreover, the fact that a group of elite jonin were here discussing plans indicated some significant conspiracy. "Kakazu?" Obito was visibly displeased. He glanced at Black Zetsu beside him and asked, "Do you know this person? Have you gathered intelligence on him?" Black Zetsu sighed inwardly before replying, "I've heard of him. Kakazu is indeed a powerful ninja. With his addition, our future operations will be much easier." Hearing this, Obito finally shed his dismissive attitude, activating his Sharingan to scrutinize Kakazu seriously. Kakazu naturally noticed the Sharingan and felt a pang of apprehension. How could the Akatsuki already have an Uchiha, and not just any Uchiha, but one with a Mangekyo Sharingan? What exactly was the Akatsuki up to? Could it really be just a subordinate organization of Hidden Rain Village? Chapter 113. The next target is Hidden Leaf Village. Seeing Kakazu's puzzled look, Byakuya patiently explained, "Kakazu-senpai, our Akatsuki organization is dedicated to peaceful development and promoting mutual exchange among the 5 great shinobi villages. To achieve this goal, we may have to employ some unconventional methods, both now and in the future." "Unconventional methods?" Kakazu was somewhat confused but also a bit excited. Byakuya nodded. "Our specific goal is to develop quietly, incite conflicts among the 5 great shinobi villages, and when they are sufficiently weakened, seize the opportunity to capture the tailed beasts and use their power to dominate the entire shinobi world. Isn't that a bit too crazy?" Kakazu's excitement didn't last long before he felt scared by Byakuya's plan. With his abilities, he could manage being a bounty hunter, but going up against the 5 great shinobi villages would likely cost him his life. High risk brings high reward. Even if you participate in the final operation, you can earn a lot of money along the way. Hearing that he could make money, Kakazu was very tempted. Any hesitation he had melted away. He agreed to their plan before quietly stepping out. After Kakazu left, Byakuya looked at Obito and Black Zetsu. "Black Zetsu-senpai, I've been surveying the Land of Fire recently and have recruited Kakazu. How is your progress?" Black Zetsu hesitated and looked towards Obito. At this moment, Byakuya continued, "I heard that the 3rd Mizukage of Hidden Mist Village is dead, and the 4th Mizukage is a ninja named Yagura Karatachi. Is your operation related to this?" Obito nodded and then said, "It does have some connection. The 3rd Mizukage was killed by Black Zetsu and me during his ninjutsu training. Otherwise, Yagura wouldn't have had the chance to rise." Mentioning the 3rd Mizukage, Obito wasn't in a good mood. He and Black Zetsu had found the 3rd Mizukage during his secluded training. They initially intended to control him with the Sharingan, but the Ganjutsu failed. The two of them went through a fierce battle, even at the cost of losing half of their bodies. Only then did they manage to deal with the 3rd Mizukage. However, this also restored Obito's confidence. The 5 Kage, who stood at the pinnacle of the shinobi world, were nothing special. As long as he had wood style, and the Sharingan, the 5 Kage were merely defeated opponents. The reason he lost to Byakuya during their sparring was simply because he was careless and underestimated his opponent. If it were a fight to the death, he would never lose to Byakuya. Byakuya, at the right moment, expressed his amazement and said incredulously, "Oh, Masked Man senpai, you really took down the 3rd Mizukage? He's one of the 5 Kage. That's really impressive." The term senpai made Obito a bit complacent. But then he thought about it, Byakuya had also captured Hanzo of the Salamander. Even if Obito had dealt with the 3rd Mizukage, it didn't seem like he was much stronger than Byakuya. It seemed like Byakuya was deliberately trying to undermine him. However, although Obito and Byakuya couldn't determine a clear winner between them, he was sure he had surpassed Kakashi. Kakashi had lost his fighting spirit and was no longer worthy of being his opponent. As the two teenagers argued, Black Zetsu, as an older individual, felt his head was about to explode. When the confrontation between them seemed imminent, Black Zetsu hurriedly said, "Should we discuss the important matters first?" Black Zetsu then sighed before praising both of them. "You both did very well this time. Byakuya recruited Kakazu, adding another executor to the Moon's Eye plan, and Mask Man, with my assistance, killed the third Mizukage, successfully removing a rival and causing chaos in Hidden Mist Village. It is foreseeable that Hidden Mist Village will be unable to recover its strength for at least 10 years. During this time, we can wait for the resurrection of the Three Tails and be ready to retrieve it. Next, we need to find ways to weaken other shinobi villages, especially the most threatening one, Hidden Leaf Village." Byakuya was the first to regain his serious demeanor, nodding and saying, "Black Zetsu-senpai is right. Hidden Leaf Village is the most threatening shinobi village. Just like the third Mizukage who was killed by Mask Man, Hidden Leaf Village has 8 ninja of that level. We cannot be careless." Obito felt quite displeased. Since when did Hidden Leaf Village have 8 Kage-level ninja? As a Hidden Leaf Village native, he didn't even know about it. At this point, Black Zetsu gently nodded in agreement and added, "Byakuya is correct. Hidden Leaf Village indeed has that many strong ninjas at present. However, Tsunade is currently away, and Jiraiya is traveling. Thus, the actual number of strong ninjas stationed in the village is at most half. Even with this number, they are still very formidable. If they become alert, capturing the Nine Tails will become extremely difficult." After a pause, Black Zetsu turned to Byakuya with a questioning look. "Byakuya, since you've identified this issue, do you have any good ideas?" "Of course." Byakuya quickly proposed a feasible plan. "Black Zetsu-senpai, I'm still young. By the time I reach Hanzo's age, the current Kage-level ninjas in Hidden Leaf Village will have all died of old age. We would win without fighting." Black Zetsu considered this for a moment and began to seriously evaluate its feasibility. Byakuya's plan was indeed quite good. For an immortal being like him, a few decades passed in the blink of an eye. As long as the Rinnegan remained intact, time was not an issue. Obito's expression changed unpredictably upon hearing this. Several decades was too long. Even if he lived that long, Obito thought that Madara and Rin's remains would have long turned to dust. Although he was determined to see the Moon's Eye plan through, waiting for decades wasn't his way of doing things. He couldn't afford to wait that long. With this in mind, Obito looked at Byakuya and Black Zetsu before asking, "Decades are too long. Even if the older generation of strong ninjas dies off, with Hidden Leaf Village's foundation, it's just a matter of time before they cultivate a new generation of strong ninjas. Are we just going to keep waiting?" "That was just the most conservative plan," Byakuya said expressionlessly, then offered a bold suggestion. "If Mask Man wants a quicker solution, you could consider teaming up with Madara Uchiha and use your space-time abilities to create accidents. Ninjas from Hidden Leaf Village will occasionally operate alone. That's the best time to hunt them. If each hunting operation goes smoothly, in less than 6 months, we could eliminate most of the powerful ninjas in the shinobi world. Then capturing the tailed beasts would become much easier." Black Zetsu considered the feasibility of this suggestion carefully before shaking his head. "This plan isn't very reliable since the chances of success are too slim. Moreover, Hidden Leaf Village also has space-time ninjas. If we're surrounded by Hidden Leaf Village's Kage-level ninjas, we would all be dead. Unless we find a way to deal with the troublesome space-time ninjas." Byakuya also shook his head and sighed. "Indeed, space-time ninjas are a problem in the neck. Even I can't be sure of defeating a space-time type ninja, so this plan is not very useful. We'll have to continue developing slowly." Hearing the conversation between Black Zetsu and Byakuya, Obito fell into deep thought. Only a space-time user could deal with another space-time user. This meant that the only ninja who could potentially kill Minato Namikaze, aside from the deceased second Hokage Dobirama Senshu, was himself. Chapter 114, A Day in the Life of the Fourth Hokage. Only someone with space-time abilities can counter another with space-time abilities. Obito wasn't sure if Byakuya was offering him a warning or mocking him yet again, but if he truly wanted to weaken Hidden Leaf Village's strength, his best chance was to target Minato Namikaze. As Minato's former disciple, Obito was well acquainted with the Flying Thunder God technique. It could be said that if not for Minato, Hidden Leaf Village might have still won the war against Hidden Stone's village, but the cost would have been devastating. After all, at that time, Hidden Leaf Village's outposts had been completely overrun, leaving only a handful of survivors. It was Minato who single-handedly turned the tide, leading them in a series of strikes against the Hidden Stone's village ninjas, pushing the front lines forward by dozens of kilometers. These achievements earned him the respect of the front-line ninjas and led to his selection as the fourth Hokage. However, despite Minato's ability to protect thousands of Hidden Leaf Village ninjas during the Hidden Stone's village war, he couldn't protect the members of his own team. In the most critical moments, He always arrived just a little too late. Obito's mind drifted to a dark thought. If he targeted Minato and Hidden Leaf Village, would Minato be late once more? But he quickly dismissed the idea. How could he be evil? This cruel world was nothing more than a game. The only real world was one where Rin existed and could live peacefully. Obito repeated this thought to himself, trying to convince himself through sheer force of will. His Sharingan seemed to grow more vivid as if stimulated by this inner turmoil. To avoid having his change in demeanor noticed by Black Zetsu and Byakuya, Obito used Kamyu to slip away into a vortex. Black Zetsu watched Obito leave, then turned to Byakuya and asked, "Byakuya, are you trying to push him towards confronting the fourth Hokage?" Byakuya responded ambiguously, "The choice is his to make." "But, Black Zetsu-senpai, I'm curious about the masked man's true identity. Is he really Madara's successor? Didn't Madara leave Hidden Leaf Village alone back then?" "Madara did leave Hidden Leaf Village alone. But not all Uchiha were willing to stay in Hidden Leaf Village." Black Zetsu glanced at Byakuya and continued, "He's a special Uchiha, one who once had ties to Hidden Leaf Village, but now those ties are more about hatred." "You really do know how to play people, Black Zetsu-senpai," Byakuya remarked with a hint of admiration, then seemed to recall something, adding, "But his background and personality feel somewhat familiar, as if I've seen him somewhere before." Even though he tries to act tough, deep down, he is conflicted. Black Zetsu's expression subtly shifted. He had almost forgotten that Byakuya and Obito had crossed paths before. Given Byakuya's abilities, it would be easy for him to remember Obito's appearance and personality. If Byakuya were to discover Obito's true identity. But then again, perhaps it doesn't really matter. Both Byakuya and Obito are merely tools for Black Zetsu to use in resurrecting his mother. As long as one of them served their purpose, that was enough. With this in mind, Black Zetsu chuckled lightly. "Is that so? Maybe you really did meet him once. But now he's Madara's successor, so his past identity doesn't matter anymore." "You're right, Black Zetsu-senpai. What someone used to be doesn't matter anymore." Byakuya agreed, nodding. Identity was something he never found important. He had almost forgotten what his own identity was before joining the Akatsuki. While Byakuya and Black Zetsu were discussing their earth-shattering schemes, Hidden Leaf Village was in the midst of the fourth Hokage's inauguration ceremony. When the third Hokage handed over the hat that symbolized the power of the Hokage, Minato Namikaze accepted it. As he placed the hat on his head, he addressed the crowd below, "Thank you all for your trust. I vow to protect Hidden Leaf Village with my life." His words were met with a resounding round of applause from the crowd, who looked up at him with admiration. After the handover ceremony between the old and new leadership, the era of the third Hokage officially ended, signaling the beginning of a new chapter. However, whether this would be an era truly belonging to the fourth Hokage or one shared by two Hokage remained uncertain. Wasting no time, Minato Namikaze moved into the Hokage's office and, with the assistance of the village's senior advisors, began his duties. The heavy workload immediately gave Minato a taste of the difficulties that came with being Hokage. Even with the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, providing guidance, Minato worked until dusk. When he finally returned home, he found Kushina in the kitchen, cooking. Upon seeing him, she smiled and said, "So, our fourth Hokage is finally back. How was your first day on the job? I remember our dream back in the academy was to become Hokage, and now you've made it come true." Minato walked over to the kitchen, helping her chop vegetables as he sighed, "Being Hokage is even harder than I imagined. If it weren't for the third Hokage's help, I don't think I could have even completed the basic tasks today." Kushina reassured him, "It's like that at first, but you'll get used to it. I'll be here, supporting you every step of the way." Half-jokingly, Minato replied, "Then I'm grateful for Lady Kushina's support." Kushina nodded in satisfaction, "That sounds good, but for now, our Hokage should go set the table. Dinner is almost ready." Minato followed her suggestion, and soon the two of them were sitting at the table, eating and chatting. As they ate, Minato, the newly appointed Hokage, began to vent some of his frustrations, while Kushina listened quietly. Despite her silent support, Minato couldn't help but express some minor grievances. Before becoming Hokage, Minato had believed that the Hokage's power was limitless. He thought that once he assumed the role, he could immediately start changing the undesirable aspects of the village. However, he quickly learned that while the Hokage does wield significant power, enforcing decisions requires the backing of a loyal Anbu unit. The Anbu under the third Hokage, while officially part of the village, essentially functioned as Hiruzen's personal force. This was manageable as long as there was no conflict between them, but in the event of a disagreement, these Anbu would follow the third Hokage's orders rather than his. Building his own Anbu unit, one loyal to him, was not going to be an easy task. It could take months or even years to fully establish, and during that time, his authority would be limited, making it difficult to implement any significant changes. Finding allies was also crucial. Due to their mentor-student relationship, Jiraiya was a natural ally. The Inoshikacho trio, with whom Minato had a long-standing bond, were also staunch supporters. However, these alliances were only enough to maintain his position. They wouldn't allow him to truly exert his influence unless he secured additional strong support. The responsibilities of the Hokage extended far beyond just these challenges. There were countless other matters that Minato needed to address as he settled into his new role. Being Hokage required Minato to juggle numerous responsibilities, including managing the Ninja Academy, maintaining relations with the daimyo, and balancing the complex dynamics among the village's ninja clans. On top of that, he had to oversee missions, cultivate new talent, and handle a myriad of other tasks. Just hearing about these duties was enough to give Kushina a headache. However, understanding that Minato needed allies, she suggested, "Minato, I'm quite close with Mikoto. How about I invite her and Fugaku over sometime? You could have a chat with Fugaku." Minato quickly grasped Kushina's intention. She was encouraging him to seek cooperation with the Uchiha clan. Since he already planned to visit the major ninja clans, and knowing that the Uchiha were an unavoidable and critical part of the village's delicate balance, he agreed with a nod. After discussing village matters and the ninja clans, Kushina remembered something else and said, "Oh, there's another thing. Kakashi still seems to be struggling to move past his grief. Otherwise, he could have been a valuable member of your Anbu team. I think I'll check on him tomorrow." Hearing Kakashi's name brought a shadow over Minato's expression. After the wars with Hidden Stones Village and Hidden Mist Village, only Kakashi remained from the original team Minato. Both Rin and Obito had died tragically, leaving not even their bodies behind. Minato couldn't help but think that if only he had been faster, he might have been able to save them. But he was always just a step too late. It felt like a curse. Kushina noticed Minato's sorrow and comforted him. "This is the reality of war. Many from our class didn't make it either. Once Hidden Stones Village comes to sign the treaty, we can finally enjoy some peace." Minato nodded, then said, "I plan to assign Kakashi to the Anbu. If he continues like this, it could lead to something tragic." Kushina was puzzled, but isn't Anbu a dark and dangerous place? Won't that just make things worse for him? Minato moved closer to Kushina and shook his head. "Don't forget, I'm the Hokage now. I'll be the one assigning missions. I intend to have Kakashi work as a protector until our child is born." Kushina smiled. "I guess I wasn't thinking straight. Maybe pregnancy really does make you a bit dull." Minato reassured her, "Not at all. You've always been smart, just a bit anxious." Then, as if recalling something, Minato added, "Oh, there's something I forgot to mention. It's a piece of news from Hidden Rain Village." Kushina looked curious. "What news? Is it good or bad?" Minato quickly replied, "I'd say it's good news. Do you remember the 3 children Jiraiya-sensei taught in the Land of Rain?" Kushina nodded, a bit surprised. "Of course I remember. But didn't they lose contact with Jiraiya-sensei? Have you heard from them recently?" Minato didn't keep her in suspense. "They've formed an organization in the Land of Rain and recently took over as the leaders of Hidden Rain Village." Kushina, intrigued, began to analyze the situation. "So they've become the leaders of Hidden Rain Village? Jiraiya-sensei's students are really impressive. If we could establish a connection with them as former comrades, the village wouldn't have to worry about large-scale attacks from the north and might even gain a powerful ally." Minato, slightly exasperated, clarified, "I didn't mean it from a Hokage's perspective. It's not about strategy." He was slightly exasperated by how Kushina seemed to be thinking of everything from his role as Hokage, always putting his responsibilities first. After a brief pause, Minato continued, "What I meant to say is that there are several Uzumaki ninjas living in Hidden Rain Village. You're not alone in this world. Yes, you still have Ken out there. Hidden Rain Village has several Uzumaki ninjas?" Kushina was momentarily stunned. She had grown accustomed to living a solitary life. Apart from Mido-sama, she had no contact with other members of the Uzumaki clan. After the fall of the Land of Whirlpools, those who survived either left the country or went into hiding. She hadn't seen any of them since. Now, Minato was telling her that there were still several Uzumaki clan members residing in Hidden Rain Village. It was hard for her to process this information, but the smile on her face betrayed her true feelings. She was genuinely happy. For a moment, she wanted nothing more than to leave Hidden Lee Village immediately and go in search of her kin. But then, just as quickly, Kushina dismissed the idea. Her position was far too sensitive. She was not only the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki but also the wife of the Hokage. Leaving the village was no simple task. The elders would never allow it. If she tried to leave with a large group, It would raise alarms in the other ninja villages and make Hidden Rain Village suspicious of Hidden Leaf Village's intentions. After all, relations between Hidden Rain Village and Hidden Leaf Village were not the best, and the Uzumaki clan's relationship with Hidden Leaf Village was strained, to say the least. Some would even say they were enemies. The brutal truth was clear: whatever the reasons at the time, Hidden Leaf Village had broken its alliance with the Uzumaki clan when they failed to protect the land of whirlpools, violating the promises made between them. And despite that betrayal, Kushina had still ended up as Hidden Leaf Village's Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. If not for Mido-sama and her meeting Minato in the academy, she might have been consumed by the Nine-Tails long ago. Seeing the turmoil in Kushina's thoughts, Minato smiled and said, "I'll arrange for Yahiko and his group to visit Hidden Leaf Village when there's an opportunity. I'm very interested in the ideas they're implementing in the Land of Rain, and Yahiko seems like a fascinating person. His letters suggest as much. When the time comes, I'll make sure you get to meet Nagato, Karen, and Byakuya." Minato hesitated for a moment when he mentioned Byakuya's name, recalling his previous encounter with him. He hadn't expected Byakuya to be in Uzumaki as well. Minato vividly remembered what Byakuya had said to Rin and Obito, advising Rin to retire from being a ninja, claiming she wasn't suited for it. Rin had been considering retirement but was talked out of it by Kakashi and Obito, only to die on the battlefield in Hidden Mist Village. Byakuya had also extended an invitation to Kakashi and Obito, which they both declined. As a result, Kakashi lost an eye, and Obito was crushed under rocks. It was as if those who ignored Byakuya's advice were cursed. Kushina noticed Minato's momentary distraction and asked, "What's on your mind?" Minato shook off his thoughts, smiling as he replied, "Nothing much, just remembering my meeting with Byakuya and Konan. We actually crossed paths once before, though I wasn't sure at the time whether they were friend or foe." Kushina was surprised and asked, "Really? You never mentioned that before. What does Byakuya look like? How old is he? How strong is he?" Minato thought for a moment and answered, "He's about Kakashi's age, both in terms of strength and years. He has a bright and sunny appearance, but when he looked at me, there was something odd in his gaze, as if he already knew my identity and location." Kushina grinned and boasted, "Well, that's the Uzumaki clan's sensory prowess for you. And you're a prominent jonin in the village, now the Hokage. It's only natural that someone would remember you." Kushina then smiled, "Go on and take a bath now since you've got to visit Kakashi tomorrow." Chapter 115, Unbreakable Allies. A week later, during a break, Minato sought out Kakashi. At that moment, Kakashi was lying on a tatami mat, staring blankly at the ceiling fan spinning above him. His hands were wet, dripping water onto the floor, and his eyes were filled with negativity and despair. Ever since Obito and Rin had died, Kakashi had often woken up in the middle of the night, haunted by the memory of the moment when he pierced Rin's chest with his own hand. He couldn't forgive himself for his incompetence, nor could he forgive himself for killing Rin. His hands, stained with the blood of his comrades, felt as if they were coated in paint. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't wash them clean. Ironically, his father had chosen to commit suicide amidst a storm of criticism after abandoning a mission to save his comrades. Yet, when Kakashi had upheld the principle that the mission was more important than his comrades, he was met with disdain from his fellow ninjas. It was only after Obito's persuasion that he began to believe in the power of teamwork, accomplishing what seemed to be an impossible mission. But then, his comrades died right before his eyes. It was as if fate had played a cruel joke on him. As Minato silently entered the living room of the Hotake residence, he sat down beside Kakashi with an apologetic expression and said, "I'm sorry I haven't visited you until now, Kakashi." Kakashi glanced at Minato and replied, "It's my fault. I haven't even congratulated you on becoming the fourth Hokage yet, but I've already prepared a gift for you. It's in the room." Looking at his disciple, who seemed to have lost all will to live, Minato didn't know how to begin the conversation. Kakashi's tone carried a hint of blame, but it was blame directed at himself. If this continued, Kakashi might follow in his father's footsteps and commit suicide. "Thank you." Minato paused for a moment before continuing, "But today, I need to ask you for another favor. I need a squad leader in my Anbu unit. Would you be willing to help me out?" "Of course." Kakashi, who had nothing else to do, found direction in Minato's request. Hearing this, Minato smiled. "That's good. I was worried about not having anyone to protect Kushina. Once you join the Anbu, you can move into my house. Kushina and I have already prepared a room for you." Kakashi nodded but then grew curious. Did Kushina-sensei really need protection? They had seen Kushina's anger before, and her sheer amount of chakra was enough to leave them breathless. Kushina-sensei was undoubtedly an elite jonin of the village. Minato leaned in close to Kakashi's ear and quietly revealed that Kushina was pregnant. Upon hearing this, Kakashi's expression turned to one of surprise. At this moment, Minato made a gesture of silence and said, "This is the village's top secret. Only by entrusting this mission to you can I be completely at ease." Kakashi nodded slightly. Though his face still carried a trace of the gloom, much of it had been dispelled. At least this proved that he wasn't useless, that he still had value. There were comrades in the village who cared about him, he wasn't alone. Minato-sensei trusted him, not because only he could protect Kushina-sensei. The real reason was to help him out of his depressed state. Otherwise, it would have been more logical to entrust the task to Lord Jiraiya, given their closer relationship. After leaving the Hatake residence, Minato returned to his own home. The previous night, after a long discussion with Kushina, he decided to unite the powers of the Hyuga and Uchiha clans to break free from the influence of the third Hokage and to suppress the factions led by Denzo and Orochimaru. It wasn't just because Orochimaru had been his rival in the past. Minato had long been displeased with both Denzo and Orochimaru. Orochimaru was one thing, apart from his cold, unfeeling methods, there wasn't much else to fault him for. But Denzo and his subordinate Anbu training program, route, was simply going too far. During the third Hokage's tenure, Denzo, as a close friend of the third, could use the pretext of a training program to build his private army. But now that Minato was Hokage, why should Denzo still be allowed to have his own private force? Through casual conversations with his friend Shikaku, Minato had learned many things even before he became Hokage. Aside from special departments like Anbu and Root, each major clan trained its own private forces, with the Uchiha having the largest and most elite force. However, these were funded by the clans themselves. Denzo's Root, on the other hand, was different. He used the Hokage's office budget to train a private army loyal to him alone, even influencing the Hokage's decisions. From a purely self-interest perspective, Minato and Denzo's factions were destined to be at odds. Earlier that morning, Minato had tried to get Denzo to hand over the personnel list of Root, but Denzo refused. The third Hokage tried to mediate, which left Minato feeling very frustrated. If it was this hard to regain control over what was originally the Hokage's own force, reforming the village in the manner of the Hidden Rain village would be even more difficult. Therefore, Minato needed the support of the Uchiha and Hyuga clans to become a Hokage in both name and fact. When he returned home, Minato saw Kushina and Mikoto in the garden. The two expectant mothers, who were of similar age, were chatting about preparations for motherhood and sharing some personal anecdotes. Naturally, Minato didn't join their conversation. His gaze fell on Fugaku, who was standing nearby. After exchanging glances, Minato greeted first, "Clan leader Fugaku, shall we go inside and have a chat?" Fugaku nodded. This was the reason he had come. Ever since the Uchiha clan missed out on the Hokage nomination, not even having the chance to run, the discontent at clan meetings had been growing. Some clan members resented the village's treatment of the Uchiha, while others voiced more discordant opinions. Fugaku knew that these clan members were just venting their frustrations, but when emotions reach a certain level, they are bound to erupt eventually. In the face of the current Senju faction, the Uchiha stood little chance of winning. Upon hearing that Kushina had invited Mikoto over, Fugaku did not hesitate to come to the Hokage residence. From the moment he saw Minato no Mikaze, he understood that the young Hokage was in as much trouble as he was. Sitting on the sofa, Minato and Fugaku talked extensively, covering topics from diplomatic environments to internal village matters. The conversation lasted for over an hour, after which both men wore satisfied smiles, clearly having reached some form of agreement. For the fourth Hokage, he needed the Uchiha to counter the third Hokage and Denzo, to free himself from the constraints imposed by the old guard. For the Uchiha, they needed the Hokage to escape their isolation and support. Both parties were gaining something valuable, making them unbreakable allies. If this alliance could be maintained, the long-standing conflict between the Senju and Uchiha might finally come to an end. However, as was often the case, an unexpected event would likely to occur. Chapter 116, The Gaze of Black Zetsu. After being provoked by Black Zetsu and Byakuya, Obito began to contemplate how to deal with the fourth Hokage. Upon arriving in Hidden Lee village overnight, Obito had been hiding in the village for a whole week. He witnessed the ceremony of Minato no Mikaze's inauguration as the fourth Hokage and saw Minato enter the Hatake residence. After observing Fugaku and Mikoto accepting the invitation and visiting the Hokage's residence, Obito could no longer restrain himself. He was concerned that the Uchiha might indeed collaborate with Minato, which would significantly bolster Hidden Leaf Village's strength. This would make the execution of the Moon's Eye plan much more challenging in the future, especially when it came to dealing with the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. Even now, Obito had no confidence in dealing with Kushina. Although Madara had provided him with a summoning contract to control the Nine Tails, he was still unable to use the summoning technique even from a distance of over 100 meters. This was the sheer proof and resilience of Kushina's exceptional sealing technique. Was he really destined to wait for decades, until Kushina was in trouble or had passed away, before making his move? Obito was torn, as living alone in this deceitful ninja world for decades had been an agonizing experience for him. However, if he only considered the timing of his actions, he could return to Hidden Leaf Village immediately and use his identity as a disciple to get close to Kushina and Minato. But if he acted on this, the success rate might be higher, though it would also mean carrying the infamy of killing his former teacher. At that moment, Minato and Fugaku emerged from the room. Kushina and Mikoto were discussing their children. Kushina smiled and asked, "Mikoto, what do you plan to name your baby?" Mikoto touched her belly and replied, "Sasuke." "Fugaku and I decided on this name. Isn't that the name of the third Hokage's father? You and Fugaku really do respect the third Hokage." Kushina chuckled and teased. In the Land of Fire tradition, naming a child after the superior's father was a sign of respect, but it also seemed like blatant flattery. Mikoto feigned a look of panic and said, "Lady Kushina, you found out. You won't hold it against me, will you? How about naming the baby after you and Minato instead?" Kushina gently shook her head and said, "Forget it. Although the third Hokage is quite stubborn and somewhat old-fashioned, he is still a good Hokage and deserves respect." At that moment, Mikoto seemed to have an idea and asked, "By the way, what's the name of your baby?" "Naruto." Kushina explained, "It's the name of the protagonist in Jiraiya-sensei's book. Minato and I liked it, so we decided to use it. Naruto, Naruto. That's a great name." Mikoto repeated it a few times and then laughed. "What if it's a girl? Should we still call her Naruto? How about naming her Naruko instead?" Kushina huffed lightly and said, "Sasuke might not be a boy either. What if it's a girl?" Mikoto squinted thoughtfully and suggested, "Then let them marry. It's a childhood engagement, and they can develop their relationship from a young age." "That's a good idea." Kushina and Mikoto's conversation was clearly overheard by Minato and Fugaku. Both Minato and Fugaku showed expressions of helplessness. Fugaku directly stated, "Mikoto was just joking. Please don't take it to heart, Lord Fourth. The Uchiha will not align with the third Hokage." Minato's expression shifted slightly, but he replied with a light smile, "Clan leader Fugaku is overthinking. We are all working for the benefit of Hidden Leaf Village. The third Hokage is a respected senior of mine. However, it's true that our two families could interact more." Fugaku nodded. It was a positive sign that the fourth Hokage was willing to communicate with the Uchiha. At least for the next decade or so, the Uchiha wouldn't have to worry about exclusion and might even have a chance at the Hokage nomination, leading to the emergence of Uchiha Hokage. After politely declining an invitation to stay for dinner, Fugaku and Mikoto left the Hokage residence. At that moment, Kushina seemed to sense something and her expression suddenly changed. Noticing Kushina's change in expression, Minato quickly appeared beside her, his face serious. "Kushina, did you sense something?" Kushina nodded and said, "While chatting with Mikoto, I felt many eyes watching us. I recognized most of the chakra signatures, but there were two unfamiliar ones. They seemed to be trying to approach me." "Trying to approach you?" Minato's face darkened. He was already aware that Kushina was under surveillance. Even when Mito was still alive, Kushina had been the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. At that time, Hidden Leaf Village's Anbu had begun monitoring the Jinchuriki. As Kushina's strength increased, the surveillance had decreased, and after becoming Hokage, only a few remained. Now, with the appearance of these new chakra signatures, it was uncertain whether they were spies from enemy countries or if they were agents of Denzo and Orochimaru. Regardless, the protection for Kushina needed to be intensified. To Minato, Kushina was his beloved wife, but to the fourth Hokage, Kushina was the village's most crucial combat force. The importance of the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki was on par with the Hokage. At this moment, in a corner of Hidden Leaf Village, Obito emerged from the vortex with a grim expression. Having been discovered by Kushina, he was forced to use Kamyu to escape. If he had stayed any longer, Minato might have detected him and a difficult battle would have ensued. All of this was due to Black Zetsu's interference. Black Zetsu had recklessly approached Kushina, almost causing a major incident. Glancing at Black Zetsu emerging from the ground, Obito spoke with a cold tone, "Why did you approach the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki? We almost got discovered." "It's because Kushina's sensory abilities are too strong. I thought the distance wouldn't be a problem." Black Zetsu quickly explained, sensing Obito's anger. Obito gave a cold snort, letting the issue slide, partly due to his own good mood. He had just obtained crucial information. Kushina, The Nine-Tails Jinchuriki was pregnant. This meant that she would be in an extremely weakened state during childbirth, a perfect opportunity to strike and weaken Hidden Leaf Village. However, Obito decided not to immediately share this secret with Black Zetsu. What Obito did not know was that Black Zetsu had already discovered this. His detection was not due to poor stealth abilities but because he sensed familiar chakra signatures on Mikoto and Kushina. Though weak, the chakra was distinctive. It was not the Nine-Tails chakra but the chakra of Indra and Ashura, the two figures who had been reincarnating for millennia. This signified that his opportunity had arisen once more. Chapter 117, Young Minato. Black Zetsu, what are you thinking about? Obito asked when he saw Black Zetsu standing still, lost in thought. Black Zetsu snapped out of his thoughts and replied, I was considering how to deal with Hidden Leaf Village. Kushina and Minato are too powerful. Capturing the Nine-Tails seems impossible. So, have you come up with any plans? Obito inquired. Black Zetsu shook his head. I haven't thought of anything effective yet, but maybe Byakuya has some ideas. We should share this information with him first. At the mention of Byakuya, Obito's expression changed sharply. He told Black Zetsu, I don't need his help. I can weaken Hidden Leaf Village on my own, and it will only take a year at most. Black Zetsu glanced at Obito and shook his head again. Even though you've inherited Madara's abilities, the Nine-Tails isn't just any tailed beast. For the sake of caution, it's better to inform Byakuya. I said, I don't need him. Obito's tone grew colder. A few days later. Time passed quickly, and it was soon time for the high-level meeting. As the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze hosted the meeting with Hidden Leaf Village's high-ranking officials, including Denzo, the leader of Root, Orochimaru, the Hokage advisor Hamura Midokado and Koharu Udatane, and the semi-retired third Hokage. Although the third Hokage had officially retired and become a member of the Elder Council, he still played a leading role in the high-level meetings. While Minato had a deep respect for the third Hokage, he felt some dissatisfaction. After all, he was the current Hokage, while the third Hokage was a former one. Considering the lack of capable officials under his command, Minato had to endure this situation for now. Whenever he proposed a question and solution, he always sought the third Hokage's opinion. This was unavoidable. Despite being chosen as the fourth Hokage due to his merits and popularity, Minato's influence and power were still far less than that of the third Hokage, who had served for decades. The era of the fourth Hokage had not yet begun, it was still the era of the third Hokage. Minato felt that becoming a true Hokage would take at least another 3 to 5 years. On the positive side, he was still very young, under 30. With that thought in mind, Minato took out his agenda and looked toward the third Hokage. Third Hokage, I plan to establish a guard unit to ensure Kushina's safety. Third Hokage, we've received a diplomatic envoy from Hidden Stones Village. Should we request land from them, or just seek war reparations? Third Hokage, the forces from Hidden Mist Village have withdrawn from the Fire Country's borders. Third Hokage, the emissaries from Hidden Rain Village hope to trade with us at the border and learn from Hidden Leaf Village's advanced techniques. Minato's requests for opinions pleased the third Hokage, who felt that he had made the right choice in appointing Minato as the fourth Hokage. Minato Namikaze, as the fourth Hokage chosen by the third Hokage, demonstrated unwavering loyalty. He was focused on seeking the third Hokage's counsel, regardless of how the fourth Hokage managed matters. This scenario was also observed by other high-ranking members of Hidden Leaf Village. Koharu Udatane and Hamura Midokado, while not aspiring to the position of Hokage themselves, were steadfast in their roles as advisors. They, along with the third Hokage, stood as pillars of support for the current Hokage. In contrast, Orochimaru and Denzo showed clear dissatisfaction. Orochimaru could not tolerate the third Hokage's controlling nature and began to suspect that there might have been foul play in the Hokage election. Denzo's discontent was more straightforward, he harbored resentment that he was not the Hokage. If Orochimaru had succeeded, Denzo felt he should have been the one to gain power, but his dark methods were no match for the third Hokage's influence. Noticing the dissatisfaction in Orochimaru and Denzo's expressions, the third Hokage remarked with a smile, Minato, it's good to consult with us elders. However, now that you are Hokage, you can make decisions as long as they align with the village's interests. Minato shook his head gently. No. I am still too young and need to heed the wisdom of the third Hokage. Otherwise, I might end up causing more harm than good despite my good intentions. The third Hokage nodded in satisfaction. The high-level meeting ended on a harmonious note, though no concrete resolutions were reached. After the meeting, Minato took the third Hokage's instructions and returned to his office. He set aside the third Hokage's comments and did not immediately tackle the work at hand. Instead, He gazed out of the window at Hidden Leaf Village, lost in thought. At 24 years old, Minato had risen to become the highest leader of Hidden Leaf Village through his achievements and strength, but his journey as Hokage had only just begun. In the months since he became Hokage, he had visited high-ranking officials and clan leaders, quickly learning the intricacies of political maneuvering. The power struggles among the high-ranking officials were not only about forming alliances and building strength but also about standing on moral high ground, using the village and its greater good to suppress rivals. Frankly, this was different from his initial expectations of what it meant to be Hokage. He had envisioned the Hokage as a figure of unwavering integrity, dedicated to protecting the village with their life, and one who could not tolerate any form of dishonesty. Yet, the reality was starkly different. While the public image of the third Hokage was pristine and untarnished, Minato, having become Hokage, realized that the third Hokage might have deliberately allowed Denzo to develop root. There was an unsettling amount of darkness hidden within the villages Anbu and Root. Minato's idealistic vision of Hokage clashes with the darker realities of political power and the complex web of loyalty, deceit, and ambition within Hidden Leaf Village. This realization was shaping his understanding of his new role and the challenges he would face in truly becoming the Hokage he aspired to be. Minato Namikaze felt the weight of his responsibilities as Hokage, realizing that much of the intrigue and plotting were not just aimed at enemies but also at allies within the village. This understanding was wearing him down and made him reflect on why Tsunade had left Hidden Leaf Village and why Jiraiya had been reluctant to take up the mantle of Hokage. Jiraiya, in particular, had seen the darker side of the village and chose to distance himself from it. Despite these realizations, Minato remained optimistic and confident in his ability to transform Hidden Leaf Village. He believed that with time, he could bring about a significant change. Pulling himself back from his wandering thoughts, Minato began to organize his work. Establishment of the escort unit. He knew it was crucial to set up an escort team for Kushina. He planned to deploy 2 Anbu squads to provide round-the-clock protection for her, ensuring her safety. Negotiations with Hidden Stones Village. Minato aimed to secure a substantial compensation from Hidden Stones Village in their peace talks. If negotiations did not yield favorable results, he was prepared to leverage his Flying Thunder God technique to demonstrate Hidden Leaf Village's might directly in Hidden Stones Village. Treaty with Hidden Mist Village. He realized the importance of swiftly concluding an agreement with Hidden Mist Village to prevent any potential shifting of their internal conflicts onto Hidden Leaf Village. Speedy resolution was essential to maintaining stability. And lastly, engagement with Hidden Rain Village. Regarding the emissaries from Hidden Rain Village who sought to establish trade and exchange knowledge, Minato decided to agree to their request. He had heard that Hidden Rain Village had recently made significant progress in reforming its internal issues. Gaining insights from Yahiko's leadership and Hidden Rain Village's reforms could be beneficial for his own plans to reform Hidden Leaf Village. Chapter 118, Hidden Rain Village Diplomatic Team compared to Hidden Leaf Village. Hidden Rain Village is undoubtedly weaker. Although in terms of Kage-level ninjas, Hidden Rain Village is not far behind Hidden Leaf Village, but other than that, Hidden Rain Village is far inferior to Hidden Leaf Village. To be blunt, the number of ninjas in Hidden Rain Village doesn't even match the number of upper-level ninjas and Anbu in Hidden Leaf Village. However, there is one aspect where Hidden Leaf Village cannot compete with Hidden Rain Village, the authority of the village leader. Despite some limitations, Yahiko's authority as the leader remains largely intact. Hidden Rain Village also does not suffer from internal strife, perfectly avoiding internal conflicts. Therefore, after receiving a letter from the 4th Hokage, Yahiko immediately informed Byakuya and the others to convene a small meeting. At the meeting, Yahiko produced the reply letter, and the 4 took turns reading through it. Firstly, the 4th Hokage did not refuse the border trade between the two countries. Secondly, he agreed to the exchange of diplomatic teams, allowing Hidden Rain Village and Hidden Leaf Village to send envoys to learn from each other's advanced experiences and address shortcomings in management. Byakuya showed little interest in the diplomatic exchange. However, judging from the content of the letter, the 4th Hokage seemed quite interested in the reforms taking place in Hidden Rain Village, possibly wanting to initiate a reform within Hidden Leaf Village due to internal conflicts. At this thought, Byakuya couldn't help but smile. Yahiko, noticing this, furrowed his brow and asked, "Is there something wrong with the letter?" "I didn't find any issues." Byakuya chuckled lightly and said, "There's nothing wrong. I'm just thinking about something pleasant." Yahiko, somewhat helpless, said, "Don't change the subject. What is it that makes you so happy?" Byakuya deliberately teased and then said, "Why do you think the 4th Hokage is being so friendly with us? You know, agreeing to trade and even allowing us to send a diplomatic team for exchange. Because he is Jiraiya-sensei's disciple, kinda like our senior?" Yahiko attempted to answer, considering this the most likely reason, apart from the strategic importance of Hidden Rain Village. Though Hidden Rain Village is not thriving, it is situated at a crucial transportation route. If any one of the sand, rock, or leaf villages controls Hidden Rain Village, they can turn it into a military stronghold, directly threatening the other two. Byakuya nodded and explained, our Hidden Rain Village's dear leader's analytical skills have improved. You guessed that the fourth Hokage is trying to win us over, but he's more interested in learning from our reform experiences and then implementing reforms within Hidden Leaf Village. After all, although Hidden Leaf Village seems united on the surface, internal conflicts are already severe. Hearing this, Yahiko suddenly understood and then recalled something, saying, you previously asked me to strengthen exchanges with Hidden Leaf Village, and now they want to imitate our reforms. Aren't you worried that Hidden Leaf Village might become stronger after the reform? But of course, I am worried. Byakuya revealed a mysterious smile and said, but it's better to believe in the possibility of the Uchiha becoming Hokage than in the fourth Hokage's ability to successfully reform the village. Yahiko was stunned for a moment. He suddenly realized that Byakuya was never a reformist but a revolutionary. Since the difficulty of reform was too high, it was better to start anew and solve problems by directly addressing the enemies. This method, though extreme, was highly effective. After confirming the delegation, Yahiko and Byakuya began discussing the selection of members for the exchange team. After a moment of contemplation, Byakuya spoke up, Yahiko, Nagato must not join the delegation. The Rinnegan must not be exposed to the world since the risk is too great. Yahiko nodded lightly, I think so too. Nagato cannot leave the Land of Rain. At this point, Byakuya added, also, it would be best if you don't join the delegation. If anything were to happen to you, the Land of Rain would fall into chaos. Hearing this, Yahiko looked doubtful, if I don't go, the only qualified ninjas left to lead the delegation to Hidden Leaf Village are you and Conan. Are you planning to visit Hidden Leaf Village this time? Byakuya shook his head and said, I mean, it would be best if you don't go. As long as you make the necessary preparations, it's possible to go. Don't forget that Denzo, who once allied with Hanzo, was also a Hidden Leaf Village ninja. Mentioning Denzo's name made Yahiko and the others' expressions change. The betrayal by Denzo and Hanzo had made them abandon their previous naive notions. In a way, they even felt a grudging gratitude towards Denzo. But gratitude aside, the enmity between Denzo and the Akatsuki would not be easily resolved. At this moment, Conan seemed to have thought of something and said, Denzo and the fourth Hokage are likely political enemies now. Denzo wouldn't dare to make a move against us in Hidden Leaf Village, as that would be tantamount to becoming a rogue ninja. But are you really not going to join the delegation? Hidden Leaf Village is the most prosperous village. Byakuya nodded and said, I won't go myself, but I'll send a clone with you. Although its combat power isn't much, it can still provide advice and strategy. How about it? Isn't that very considerate? Yahiko and Conan exchanged speechless looks but eventually accepted Byakuya's goodwill. Even with an invitation from Minato, their senior, they would remain vigilant. The best way to guard against potential backstabbing was to bring along Byakuya, even if it were just his clone. In the following time, Yahiko and Byakuya finalized the number and departure date for the delegation. However, it wasn't so simple to set the delegation in motion. They had to wait for the situation to stabilize and obtain the fourth Hokage's consent. A month later, the delegation heading to Hidden Leaf Village departed from Hidden Rain Village. Byakuya was also a member of the delegation, but he deceived Yahiko and Conan by sending his real body instead of a clone. The story about the clone was a lie, crafted to give him a reason to act independently. He had long wanted to visit Hidden Leaf Village, but going there openly did not fit his style or the goals of his mission. Yahiko and Conan genuinely wanted to exchange experiences. If the fourth Hokage were to follow their suggestions, with the support of Hidden Leaf Village, the Akatsuki's ideals would become much easier to achieve. Byakuya, however, had different plans. He never believed that Hidden Leaf Village would support the Akatsuki. His goal was to create internal strife within Hidden Leaf Village, to divide it into factions that could then be absorbed into the Akatsuki. The talent within Hidden Leaf Village, rather than being wasted on internal conflicts, would be better utilized within the Akatsuki. As for how to instigate conflict, Byakuya planned to send a gift to an old friend. It had been several months since he last corresponded with his very dear sponsor and advisor, Denzo. This time, he would rely on Denzo's assistance to help him achieve his goal of recruiting talent. Chapter 119, Master and Apprentice reunited soon after leaving the Land of Rain. A team of ninjas wearing animal masks blocked the path of the delegation. Byakuya looked at the team in front of him, frowned, and said, these people aren't from Hidden Leaf Village trying to attack us, are they? I'll go over and kill them all. Byakuya, don't be so hasty. Conan said this, but she was already preparing for battle. Her clothes gradually transformed into explosive tags, ready to be fired at any moment. Seeing the delegation's readiness for combat, Gakuen Yuzuka appeared somewhat flustered. Removing his mask, Gaku quickly took out his forehead protector, symbolizing his identity, and explained, "Don't act rashly. We are members of the Anbu under the Hokage, tasked with escorting the delegation to the village." Only then did Byakuya sheath his weapon and walk up to Gaku, smiling lightly as he said, "So you're from the Hokage's Anbu? Are you under the 3rd Hokage or the 4th Hokage?" Noticing the hostility in Byakuya's demeanor, Gaku instinctively took a half step back, then straightened up and said, "Please don't ask further. I am from Hidden Leaf Village's Anbu and follow the Hokage's orders." "Very good, that's a perfect answer. I'm even more interested in this exchange now." Byakuya glanced at Gaku, then slowly moved back to stand behind Yahiko and Konan. He roughly guessed the identity of this Hidden Leaf Village Anbu member and had reasons to give Yahiko and Konan a hint. After Byakuya stepped back, Gaku appeared somewhat at a loss. Seeing this, Yahiko sighed lightly, started his performance by apologizing for Byakuya's rudeness, and then began to subtly probe into the current situation in Hidden Leaf Village. Back in the team, Yahiko and Konan focused on Byakuya. Byakuya's recent actions were quite reckless and could easily damage the relations between Hidden Leaf Village and Hidden Rain Village. However, Byakuya was not the kind of ninja to act frivolously, so his actions must have had a deeper meaning. Byakuya didn't hide anything and spoke directly. Although the leader of Hidden Leaf Village's team is a Jonin, his strength is only slightly better than a Chunin, and the other members are only of average Chunin level. Byakuya smiled before continuing, "There are 2 possible reasons why the 4th Hokage sent such ninjas to greet us. The first possibility is that the 4th Hokage is underestimating us and deliberately has sent these weaklings to humiliate us. The second possibility is that these are his strongest subordinates. I lean towards the second possibility. The 4th Hokage doesn't have many capable subordinates. This invitation for an exchange is likely an attempt to win us over, so Yahiko, when you negotiate, try to secure more benefits for the village." After hearing Byakuya's analysis, both Yahiko and Konan were somewhat surprised. Byakuya had deduced so much information from just encountering the Hidden Leaf Village Anbu, his analytical skills were astonishing. However, knowing this in advance was also beneficial. Even among close relatives, clear accounts must be kept, let alone when representing Hidden Leaf Village and Hidden Rain Village. It would be impossible for Hidden Rain Village to bear unilateral costs. After a brief discussion, Yahiko and the others did not waste time. Under the escort of the Anbu, they continued their journey. After spending a week traveling across much of the Land of Fire, the delegation finally arrived at Hidden Leaf Village's city limits. Standing on the outskirts of the city, Byakuya saw the iconic buildings of Hidden Leaf Village. Hidden Leaf Village's landmark structures are twofold, the Hokage Rock and the Valley of the End statues. The Hokage Rock represents the past Hokages who silently watch over the village, while the Valley of the End statues symbolize the reconciliation between Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha, the 2 legendary figures whose accord founded Hidden Leaf Village. As the delegation entered Hidden Leaf Village's main gate, Byakuya felt the unique prosperity and tranquility of the village. Though not as bustling as the great cities of his past life, Hidden Leaf Village stood out among the ninja world for its distinct peace, the air filled with a serene aura unlike the musty smell of Hidden Rain Village. Returning his gaze from the surroundings, Byakuya looked ahead at the welcoming party. The reception team from Hidden Leaf Village included many high-ranking officials, such as the 4th Hokage, the 3rd Hokage, Jiraiya, and 2 elder advisors. Although Hidden Rain Village wasn't one of the 5 great shinobi countries, it stood out among the smaller ninja villages. Upon seeing Yahiko and Konan, the 4th Hokage remained composed, but Jiraiya could hardly contain his excitement. If the occasion hadn't been so solemn, he would have rushed to embrace his former student. Yahiko was also somewhat excited, as he hadn't seen Jiraiya in many years. Despite the long separation, Jiraiya's appearance seemed unchanged, while Yahiko had grown from a war orphan into the leader of Hidden Rain Village. After exchanging pleasantries with the 4th Hokage, Yahiko and Konan moved to Jiraiya's side, creating a touching scene of reunion. Byakuya had little interest in the emotional reunion and instead focused on sensing the chakra levels of those present. The chakra of Minato no Mikeji and the 3rd Hokage far exceeded that of a typical Jonin, comparable to that of the Uzumaki clan members. This was a fundamental aspect of their strength. However, Byakuya was somewhat surprised to find that Jiraiya's chakra was not as abundant. Did Jiraiya have a technique to hide his chakra, possibly related to Mount Myabaku's powers? Nevertheless, these details were secondary, as Byakuya had already sensed Kushina Uzumaki's chakra. Kushina's chakra was slightly less than his own, but the presence of the Nine-Tails chakra within her was enormous. Despite the sealing technique masking it, it was still strikingly prominent. Refocusing his attention, Byakuya shifted his gaze from the shadow-level figures to others. Recruiting high-level shinobi was challenging and costly. Finding and recruiting potential candidates was often a more cost-effective approach. At this moment, Hidden Leaf Village was not without promising prospects. Just then, Byakuya detected a malicious gaze. Following it, he saw a figure wrapped in bandages hiding in the shadows, Denzo Shimura. Without hesitation, Byakuya met Denzo's gaze directly and offered a friendly smile. Upon realizing he had been spotted, Denzo frowned. He hadn't wanted to meet the delegation but couldn't resist observing their arrival, especially looking for Byakuya. Denzo had been opposed to the idea of exchanging with Hidden Rain Village from the start. On one hand, he feared his actions against Akatsuki might be exposed. On the other, he was wary of Byakuya possibly infiltrating the delegation to undermine Hidden Leaf Village. Byakuya's open appearance within the delegation left Denzo unsettled. He was unsure whether Byakuya was secretly executing a plan to sabotage Hidden Leaf Village or merely making a public appearance. Regardless, Denzo could not allow Byakuya to roam Hidden Leaf Village unchecked. Chapter 120, The Various Faces of Hidden Leaf Village. Apart from Denzo, several other ninjas in the crowd had their eyes on Byakuya. After observing for a while, the Uchiha guards who were maintaining order recognized Byakuya's figure and couldn't help but grit their teeth. They remembered the humiliation they had endured a few months ago. The young man before them had captured all of them alive in just a few rounds and then had brutally humiliated the Uchiha clan by demanding a ransom. Since returning to their clan, they had been eager to exact revenge and erase that shame. However, it seemed that their chance for revenge was slim now, as Byakuya appeared as a member of Hidden Rain Village exchange team, and Hokage would not allow them to make trouble proactively. With the strength of the younger generation of the Uchiha clan, sending more people would only lead to more humiliation. Shizue also recognized Byakuya and noticed the dissatisfaction of the clan members towards Byakuya. Unlike his clansmen, Shizue did not feel any anger over being captured by Byakuya. It is because he simply considered it a matter of lacking strength. His clansmen were too narrow-minded, always focusing on individual grievances rather than the welfare of the clan. Moreover, the exchange team came with the intention of peace, and he could not disrupt that. Byakuya's visit to the village was worth pondering. He had directly expressed his desire for Shizue and the Uchiha clan to join Hidden Rain Village, which indicated that this visit was not merely about cooperation. Since the fourth Hokage came into power, the relationship between the clan and the village had improved considerably. If this state of affairs continued, the Uchiha might soon integrate into the village, and there was even a possibility of becoming Hokage in the future. Although Byakuya's experience and strength were superior to his, he was still no match for the fourth Hokage. With that thought, Shizue looked at the fourth Hokage and Yahiko in the group before finally focusing on Itachi beside him. After months of interaction, Shizue confirmed that Itachi shared his views and was a like-minded clansman. Despite his young age, he could think from the village's perspective, though he was not very adept at expressing his inner feelings, often keeping things to himself. If Itachi could become a bit more optimistic, he would surely become the first Uchiha Hokage in the future. Itachi looked at Shizue with some confusion, following his gaze to Hidden Rain Village exchange team. He didn't know the specific identities of these individuals but could tell that the village was treating this exchange with great importance. He began to consider how he would handle the Rain Ninjas if he were Hokage. In contrast to Shizue's confident outlook for the future, Kakashi's feelings were more complex. He recognized Byakuya and Konan and knew in advance that they had become high-ranking members of Hidden Rain Village. While their identities were similar the last time they met, there had been significant changes since then. What troubled Kakashi the most was that all of Byakuya's companions were still alive, while Rin and Obito had sacrificed their lives, leaving him unable to protect his comrades, a burden he could never reconcile. At this moment, Asuma Saratobi, noticing Kakashi's expression, asked with curiosity, "Kakashi, do you know the people from the Hidden Rain Village exchange team?" Kakashi nodded lightly. "I was saved by them during a mission in the Land of Grass. Some of them are also students of Jiraiya-sama." "Ah, so they're Jiraiya-sama's disciples. No wonder Hidden Rain Village was the first to come. I suspected that things weren't that simple as there must have been some private agreements made." "That old man." Asuma grumbled, his tone filled with dissatisfaction towards the higher-ups. Kakashi didn't respond to Asuma's grumbling. Despite Asuma being the son of the third Hokage with commendable character and strength, he always seemed to harbor a strange animosity towards the higher-ups, viewing them as duplicitous. Yet, the highest leader Hidden Leaf Village ever had was Asuma's own father, the third Hokage. Might Guy, however, didn't engage in such indirect discussions. He asked straightforwardly, "Kakashi, you've been watching that black-haired ninja closely. How strong is he?" After some thought, Kakashi replied, "His strength is exceptional. Although I haven't seen him go all out yet, he's definitely an elite among Jonin. Guy's interest was piqued by Kakashi's words. Filled with excitement, he looked at Byakuya in the distance and said, "A ninja recognized by even Kakashi, I really want to fight him. You should focus on becoming a Jonin first." Kakashi didn't think Guy stood a chance against Byakuya. Even though Guy's father had displayed strength comparable to a Hokage on the battlefield, time was needed for growth, and Byakuya was already far ahead. After the welcoming ceremony, the exchange team was settled into a residence. This residence, nestled by the mountains and water, would serve as Hidden Rain Village exchange team's base for the next half-month. New to Hidden Leaf Village, Byakuya stayed diligently within the residence and did not venture out. Well, Hidden Leaf Village was not like Hidden Rain Village. Here, experts were numerous, and powerful shinobi were commonplace. If Hidden Leaf Village decided to take action against the Hidden Rain Village exchange team, Byakuya could only attempt to escape with Konan, as his ability to handle opponents of similar strength was limited against multiple enemies. However, apart from life-threatening situations, it was unlikely that Hidden Leaf Village's major factions would unite against the Hidden Rain Village team. Otherwise, the ninja world would still be under the rule of Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha, and the four great ninja villages wouldn't have been able to stir up any trouble. Yahiko and Konan were somewhat surprised by Byakuya's behavior. In the past, Byakuya would have sneaked out to scout, but this time he stayed put in the residence, not even discussing the situation with them. However, it was understandable. Byakuya's main body was still in the village, and a shadow clone's endurance was limited. It was more practical to be concerned about whether Byakuya might take action against other villages while they were absent. They recalled Byakuya's previous desire to attack the Land of Grass to expand the Akatsuki's influence. Byakuya might be preparing to take action against Hidden Rain Village now, and they hoped that by the time they returned, everything would still be manageable. Byakuya seemed to guess Yahiko and Konan's thoughts and rolled his eyes with a look of disdain. Byakuya was the kind of person who would act decisively even against small countries. His shadow clone was currently busy working with Nagato to create the 6 Paths of Pain. Besides, with the ninja village's era upon them, no one really played the game of territorial expansion anymore. The real plan was to industrialize Land of Rain and treat the Land of Grass as a market for dumping goods. The collaboration and exchange with Hidden Leaf Village were precisely for this purpose, making money and significantly expanding Hidden Rain Village's influence. That was more than enough. If Hidden Rain Village were to truly annex the Land of Grass, it would only serve to shift the internal conflicts of other ninja villages, which would be a rather noble act in itself. Byakuya's future plans involved quietly developing, igniting internal conflicts within the 5 great ninja villages, and then causing division among them to bring them into the Akatsuki. To achieve these goals, he had no qualms about being a behind-the-scenes manipulator or even becoming the dark force akin to Black Zetsu. Chapter 121, Harmless Byakuya. Early the next morning, Byakuya accompanied Yahiko and Konan to the Hokage Tower to meet the 4th Hokage. Compared to yesterday, the atmosphere was less formal and more familiar. They were, after all, fellow disciples with a common teacher. After some pleasantries, the 4th Hokage began to outline the day's itinerary. He planned to take Yahiko and the others to visit the Ninja Academy in the morning and observe the combat exercises in the Forest of Death in the afternoon, discussing each other's experiences in village management. Yahiko and his companions had no objections to these arrangements. They were keen to visit the Ninja Academy and see how the first ninja school established by Hidden Leaf Village was faring. This would greatly help them in reforming their own ninja school. Accompanied by the 4th Hokage, they quickly arrived at the Ninja Academy. The Ninja Academy was not very large, and the number of students was relatively small, with only around 300 students in total. Each graduating class consisted of about 90 ninjas. Seeing so few ninja students, Yahiko and Konan were taken aback. For Hidden Rain Village, the number of students was astonishing because the total number of ninjas in Hidden Rain Village was not much higher than the number of students here. However, to Byakuya, this number seemed a bit small. In his estimate, the Ninja Academy should graduate around 500 ninjas each year to maintain the thousands of ninjas in Hidden Leaf Village. But considering that training ninjas quickly wasn't too difficult, Byakuya leaned towards the idea that the Ninja Academy primarily trained Chunin leaders. As long as the number of Chunin kept up, the lower-ranked ninjas could be mass-produced by the various ninja villages. Otherwise, there wouldn't be the legendary 3,000-strong Saratobi ninja army in later years. If the numbers were truly that terrifying, the Ninja Academy would have been filled to capacity long ago. Upon entering the Ninja Academy, Minato Namikaze provided a detailed introduction to the school, including the standards for student graduation assessments and future plans for the academy. The general idea was that Hidden Leaf Village planned to pursue an elite approach, developing ninjas in a well-rounded manner. After detailing this, Minato looked at Yahiko and his companions, eager to see their surprised reactions. Hidden Leaf Village's Ninja Academy was the only one focused on comprehensive development. In contrast, other villages either trained lower-ranked ninjas to perform basic tasks after learning shuriken throwing and a few simple jutsu, or focused solely on combat skills. Only Hidden Leaf Village emphasized all-around development, including tactics and teamwork, in training lower-ranked ninjas. Unfortunately, Yahiko and Conan remained unmoved, even feeling like saying, "Is that it?" In Hidden Rain Village, the training of ninja students was already multifaceted, with even Jonin involved in their education. This was all thanks to Byakuya's initiatives, indicating that Byakuya had a broader vision than Hidden Leaf Village. At this moment, Byakuya appeared contemplative and asked, "Lord Hokage, how many years does it take to graduate from the Ninja Academy?" 3 years. Minato Namikaze answered without hesitation. Then he added, "However, during peacetime, I plan to extend it to 5 or even 6 years. 3 years? Byakuya was somewhat surprised by this answer. In his impression, the Ninja Academy should have a 6-year program. If it's only 3 years, then his 9-year education model might be a bit ahead of its time, which could make cost control difficult. However, considering the graduation ages of the Sannin and Kakashi and others, Hidden Leaf Village had always been extending the graduation age. The Sannin initially graduated at 6 years old, a 1-year system. Kakashi and his peers delayed to 3 years, graduating at 9, and it wasn't until Naruto's era that it became 6 years. Thinking of this, Byakuya smiled at Minato and said, "Sorry, I was a bit distracted. Could you share your detailed plans with me? We in Hidden Rain Village are also considering extending the graduation time." Minato glanced at Byakuya and nodded slightly, "Of course, but please note that plans can change at any time. I'm only sharing some preliminary thoughts." This scene puzzled Yahiko and Conan. Was Byakuya mocking Minato, or was he genuinely seeking advice? Regardless, they decided to carefully listen to their plans, as it would be very helpful for their future. While Minato was showing Byakuya around the Ninja Academy, in the Hokage's office, the third Hokage and others were observing the inspection team through a crystal ball. Seeing Minato and Yahiko and the others chatting and laughing, the third Hokage couldn't help but touch his pipe and chuckled. Minato has grown a lot. He handles the exchange team with ease now. After the Hidden Rain Village delegation leaves, it should improve our village's diplomatic environment and foster deeper cooperation with those smaller ninja villages. Hearing this, Koharu Utatane and Hamura Mitokado added, "This is all thanks to Jiraiya. We were initially opposed when he left the village without permission, but it turns out that the orphans he trained have grown into high-ranking officials in Hidden Rain Village. However, why did Hanzo the Salamander choose them as his successors?" The third Hokage took a couple of puffs from his pipe and explained, "I believe there are a few reasons. First, Hanzo did not train a competent successor. Second, he has lost his ambition. It's better to have Jiraiya's disciples confirmed as successors. This way, it resolves the succession issue and helps avoid chaos in the Land of Rain. But I suspect that Hanzo still holds the real power. Sending Yahiko and his group is probably just a gesture of goodwill." Koharu nodded and then said, "That makes sense. But who is this Byakuya? He seems to have a good relationship with Yahiko and Conan." The third Hokage exhaled a puff of smoke and continued, "According to reports from my Aunt Boo, Yahiko was favored by Hanzo because of Byakuya, and ultimately, Byakuya was taken in as Hanzo's disciple." "Ah, I see," Mitokado said with a newfound understanding. "But Byakuya looks so innocent. Is he really Hanzo the Salamander's disciple?" Perhaps irritated by the smoke or feeling that the others' comments were absurd, Denzo's face darkened as he stood up and said, "Don't be fooled by Byakuya's innocent appearance. He's actually one of the most devious ninjas in Hidden Rain Village." Denzo's statement caught the attention of the others. They looked at him, puzzled by his strong animosity toward Byakuya. Byakuya seemed harmless and very interested in the Ninja Academy's plans. He appeared to be a pacifist ninja. Was there some hidden truth behind this? Or was Denzo simply opposed to good-natured people? The third Hokage then asked Denzo, "Denzo, I remember that you were active in the Land of Grass and the Land of Rain about 6 months ago. Did you have any dealings with them?" Chapter 122, Lord Byakuya. The third Hokage's questioning left Denzo in a brief moment of contemplation. 6 months ago, he had indeed engaged in espionage activities in the Land of Rain, attempting to exploit the conflicts between the Akatsuki and Hidden Rain Village to create chaos. He had invested in Byakuya, aiming to use him to seize control as the leader of the Akatsuki. However, Denzo hadn't anticipated that Byakuya's ambitions extended beyond just the Akatsuki's leadership to the entire Land of Rain. Byakuya had been concealing his true power and, taking advantage of Hanzo's absence, had taken over Hidden Rain Village. Indeed, Byakuya was Hanzo's disciple during his pretense of being captured. Denzo had witnessed the disciple ceremony along with other Hidden Rain Village ninjas. However, this information could not be shared with Hiruzen and Saratobi. Revealing that Denzo's root had suffered significant damage would likely give the third and fourth Hokages an opportunity to strip him of his power. Heck, the root might even be disbanded. After a moment of reflection, Denzo said, I did have some conflicts with them, but that's all in the past. However, Byakuya is indeed quite formidable. You must not underestimate him. Is that so? The third Hokage looked at Denzo with suspicion. Under the third Hokage's gaze, Denzo felt a surge of unspoken anger. He furrowed his brows and said, What are you looking at me for? Everything I do is for Hidden Leaf Village. The third Hokage was about to admonish Denzo in his Hokage tone but decided against it. Denzo's evasive behavior clearly indicated he was hiding something. The situation was certainly not as simple as Denzo claimed, but as he was no longer Hokage, Hiruzen couldn't force him to speak. However, this did not stop him from being suspicious of Denzo. After decades of working together, he knew Denzo too well. Denzo's actions regarding Hidden Rain Village likely involved serious blunders and possibly even harmed the village's interests. Koharu Utatane and Hamura Midokado were no strangers to this kind of scene. They wondered if Denzo was being manipulated by someone using transformation techniques. As the atmosphere in the advisor's office grew increasingly tense, the third Hokage sighed and said, Forget it. Let's focus on Minato's performance. He's the Hokage now. Denzo, at a loss for words, could only continue to watch the crystal ball. With Minato becoming the fourth Hokage, the balance of power in the village had shifted significantly and had yet to be restored. Denzo had even mistakenly treated Hiruzen as the Hokage earlier, forgetting that Saratobi was now merely an elder advisor. At the Ninja Academy, after the tour concluded, Minato took the delegation to a local restaurant for a meal and rest. He shared his insights on managing a ninja school with Byakuya and chatted with Yahiko about amusing stories involving Jiraiya. Jiraiya, upon hearing about his past embarrassing moments, wasn't troubled. Instead, he laughed and reminisced with Konan. During their conversation, Jiraiya inquired about Nagato, curious as to why he didn't accompany them. Konan explained that the situation in the Land of Rain was still chaotic, and someone needed to stay behind to maintain order. Jiraiya sighed with sadness in his eyes but understood. Having spent 3 years in the Land of Rain, he was aware of the region's difficulties. The conditions in the Land of Rain were vastly different from those in Hidden Leaf Village. For ordinary people there, simply surviving was a challenge. Glancing at Byakuya in the distance, Jiraiya turned to Konan with a puzzled expression and asked, Konan, how did you come to know Byakuya? And when was the Akatsuki organization founded? Konan looked at Byakuya and replied, After you left, we wandered in the Land of Rain for a few more years before meeting Byakuya. Together, we established the Akatsuki. The Akatsuki was initially based on the principles you left behind, but Byakuya introduced some new elements. Konan paused here, hesitating about whether to continue. Jiraiya was taken aback. The founding of the Akatsuki had always been a point of pride for him, and he was curious about what Byakuya had added to it. Noticing Jiraiya's confused expression, Konan continued, Byakuya felt that you and Yahiko were too idealistic. Some things can't be achieved through negotiation and mutual understanding alone. However, the current Akatsuki has abandoned some of its illusions and begun to face reality. Jiraiya fell into deep thought. He found himself unable to fully grasp Konan's words and then laughed wryly, admitting to himself that he had become old. The 3 orphans who once followed him had grown up and established their own paths. Meanwhile, he felt as though he was still standing in place, constantly pursuing the peace promised by the prophecy. At this moment, Byakuya noticed Konan and Jiraiya and approached them, saying, Hello, Jiraiya-sama. You must be Yahiko and the others' teacher. Jiraiya was pulled back to reality and nodded slightly. You must be Byakuya. I just learned about your involvement. Yahiko and the others owe you a lot. Of course. If it weren't for me, the Akatsuki would have been wiped out long ago. Byakuya's words left Jiraiya momentarily stunned. He had merely been boasting out of habit, but it seemed Byakuya was genuinely confident. Given the strength of his 3 disciples, it was hard to believe they could have been easily defeated. However, considering Byakuya's age, Jiraiya could understand to some extent. He himself had been more arrogant in his youth, always claiming to be the Toad Sage and the savior of the ninja world. It was only through reality's harsh lessons that he had matured and become more grounded. Such an immature young man needed to experience the world's challenges to grow. Thinking of this, Jiraiya stood up, extending his large hand and pulling Byakuya into an embrace. Well then, I must thank the savior of my disciples properly. Byakuya, after nightfall, I'll take you out to enjoy the village's specialty, Ikiraku ramen. Seeing this, Konan's eyes flashed with a hint of concern. Jiraiya's familiarity might make Byakuya wary, especially since Byakuya wasn't exaggerating, he really had saved the Akatsuki, and that was the truth. Byakuya broke free from Jiraiya's embrace and said sternly, "I'm not a kid. Moreover, my mentor, Hanzo, is the same age as the third Hokage. By that logic, I am your peer. I'll address you as Jiraiya-sama, and you should respond with Byakuya-sama." Jiraiya couldn't help but chuckle at Byakuya's serious demeanor. Alright, Byakuya-sama. I officially invite you to an important event tonight. Please be sure to attend. At this, Byakuya nodded and said, "I accept Jiraiya-sama's invitation." Seeing this, Konan finally relaxed. She didn't want any conflict between Byakuya and Jiraiya. Maintaining the current peaceful situation was ideal. However, since Byakuya's arrival in Hidden Leaf Village, he had consistently maintained a harmless facade. What was his true intention? Although a 14-year-old might act this way, they were members of the Akatsuki, and their motives could be more complex. Chapter 123, Opinions vary. After Yahiko and Minato finished their discussion, Byakuya and Jiraiya had already become close friends, engaging in a relationship akin to that of old comrades. Yahiko and Minato both recognized that Jiraiya was trying to bridge the gap between them and Byakuya, but this inadvertently lowered their status in a way they hadn't anticipated. Fortunately, in the ninja world, status was less about age and more about strength and position. Just like in the Hyuga clan, where Neji and Hinata were peers despite their childhood friendship, once they reached a certain age, formal respect must be maintained. The ninja world's rules might not be as strictly enforced as in the Hyuga clan, but they still existed. After lunch, the group left the ninja academy and headed towards the Forest of Death. The Forest of Death was the largest of Hidden Leaf Village's training grounds, spanning over 100 square kilometers and home to many dangerous creatures like venomous snakes and fierce beasts. The delegation was there to observe a large-scale combat drill taking place within the forest. Upon reaching the central tower, Minato turned on the television screen, which displayed real-time footage of the drill from cameras scattered throughout the Forest of Death. The exercise was divided into two sides, Blue Team and Red Team, each consisting of 4 squads with 16 members in total, making 32 participants. These 32 ninjas were carefully selected by Hidden Leaf Village to demonstrate their formidable strength and depth. As the countdown ended, both teams disappeared from sight and engaged in fierce combat. Observing the team compositions, Byakuya realized that this was more of a performance arranged by Hidden Leaf Village rather than a genuine combat drill. In a real battlefield, such evenly matched combatants and balanced forces are rare. Nevertheless, Byakuya remained intrigued and began using his sensory abilities to track the positions of the ninjas, testing the limits of his perception. As the two sides first clashed, Minato started explaining the structure of Hidden Leaf Village's ninja teams. A Hidden Leaf Village squad typically consisted of 4 members, including at least 1 medical ninja, basic knowledge that most in the ninja world were familiar with. Minato elaborated on how Hidden Leaf Village differentiated its training for ninja squads, essentially cultivating scout teams, tactical teams, taijutsu teams, and comprehensive teams, with a focus on elite development. Minato's explanation was quite detailed, but Byakuya quickly grasped the concept. It was reminiscent of the later 12 Ninja Guardians approach. From the results, it was clear that the 12 Guardians training was highly successful, with most teams, except for Asuma's scout team, possessing the capability to contend with Kage-level ninjas. At that moment, Byakuya sensed an unusual chakra. It seemed that a wild beast had suddenly entered the Forest of Death, emitting a significant amount of chakra. Just as Byakuya was about to alert the 4th Hokage, one of the monitor feeds went dark, while another showed a giant, pitch-black figure attacking Hidden Leaf Village's ninjas. Upon seeing the giant, pitch-black figure attacking the Hidden Leaf Village ninjas, Yahiko and Konan exchanged worried glances and addressed Minato. "Minato-senpai, is this also part of the exercise? To demonstrate how your village deals with large summoning beasts?" Minato's expression darkened. He wished it were part of the plan, but it was an unforeseen event. Despite the situation, Minato maintained a calm demeanor in front of Yahiko and Konan. "Yahiko, you're right, this is part of the exercise. However, the beast's strength is somewhat excessive. Jiraiya-sensei, could you please assist in handling the situation?" Jiraiya understood Minato's request and nodded. As he was about to leave the tower, Byakuya followed him and said, "Since Jiraiya-sensei is going, I'll join too. It's been a while since I had a proper fight, and I'm feeling a bit out of practice." "Byakuya." Jiraiya hesitated, concerned for Byakuya's safety. But then he realized that with his protection, Byakuya was unlikely to face any real danger. So, he nodded and said, "It's good for you to see this firsthand. Just stay behind me." After Byakuya and Jiraiya left, Yahiko seemed to sense something and asked quietly, "Minato-senpai, Is there a chance that this exercise might turn into a real crisis? Minato reluctantly nodded, his eyes revealing his concern. Yahiko patted Minato's shoulder and said, Minato-senpai, you'll need to adapt. These kinds of accidents within a controlled environment are not truly unexpected. Minato was surprised by Yahiko's composed attitude, but his worry extended beyond the immediate situation. He feared that the incident might be a premeditated disruption, suggesting that someone in the village did not want him to improve relations with Hidden Rain Village. At that moment, Conan also approached to offer comfort. Don't worry too much, Minato-senpai. Byakuya is exceptionally strong. Yahiko becoming the leader of Hidden Rain Village is largely thanks to him. Minato paused, realizing that the Akatsuki is not originally a subordinate of Hidden Rain Village. On their way to confront the large beast, Jiraiya occasionally slowed his pace to let Byakuya catch up. However, he soon noticed that Byakuya's speed seemed to exceed his own. A young kid like this couldn't possibly surpass him in speed, even at this age, not even Minato could. After attempting to accelerate, Jiraiya noticed that Byakuya was still able to keep up steadily without showing any signs of fatigue. This left Jiraiya puzzled, wanting to understand Byakuya's true strength. Was he really only at the level of a Jonin as Minato and Kakashi said, or had he already reached the elite Jonin level, just a step away from becoming Kage-level shinobi? Without more time to think, Jiraiya saw a large beast ahead. The beast was a giant snake, over 20 meters long. Just passing through the death forest, it left a deep trail, and a swipe of its tail could snap a tree in half. Seeing the giant snake, Jiraiya furrowed his brow. In his memory, giant snakes were mostly associated with the Richi cave and had significant ties to his friend Orochimaru. Was this giant snake released by Orochimaru? But why would Orochimaru send a giant snake to the death forest? Was he trying to sabotage the exercise? Jiraiya shook his head. Orochimaru wasn't so petty. Even if he had lost the election for Hokage, he wouldn't resort to such disgraceful acts. Just as Jiraiya was hesitating, Byakuya had already made his move. After using the instant water technique to disappear from his original spot, Byakuya reappeared directly on top of the giant snake. He infused his sword with chakra and struck it into the snake's body. The giant snake convulsed, and then blood gushed out like a waterfall, as it collapsed into a pool of blood. Seeing this, Jiraiya was stunned. The giant snake was killed with a single blow from Byakuya. Even if he had taken the shot himself, he couldn't have done it so effortlessly. Chapter 124, The Sigh of the Third Hokage. After dealing with the giant snake, Byakuya returned to Jiraiya's side, waving his hand in front of the latter's eyes. Jiraiya-sensei, are there any other fierce beasts in the training grounds? This giant snake wasn't enough for me to warm up. Hearing this, Jiraiya's mouth twitched slightly. Considering the giant snake's size, it had to be at least an elite chunin in strength. It was easy for him to handle, but Byakuya was so young and managed to deal with it so effortlessly. Recalling his own strength at around 14 or 15, Jiraiya found himself momentarily dazed. As he snapped out of his reverie, Jiraiya looked at Byakuya with increased seriousness. He couldn't just see Byakuya as a mere junior anymore. Byakuya deserved his full attention. The scene of Byakuya slashing the giant snake also caught the attention of the Hidden Leaf Village ninjas participating in the exercise. They weren't sure if the giant snake was part of the exercise, but Byakuya's combat abilities were astonishing to them. Even more shocking was the forehead protector Byakuya wore. When did Hidden Rain Village produce such a talented young ninja? Was this the reason for the village's cooperation with Hidden Rain Village? Facing the envious gazes directed at him, Byakuya accepted them calmly. His current strength was entirely due to his own efforts. Well, also from the trivial assistance from the system. After coming out of his daze, Jiraiya instructed the red and blue teams to continue the exercise. He then took Byakuya back to the central area of the Forest of Death and, while walking, curiously asked, Byakuya, who is your teacher, and why have you been hiding your true strength? Byakuya looked at Jiraiya with confusion. My teacher is Lord Hanzo. And when have I ever hidden my strength? I've always said I'm very strong, second only to the 5 Kage. Upon hearing this, Jiraiya carefully reviewed his memories. He realized Byakuya wasn't lying. Byakuya had always emphasized his identity as Hanzo's disciple and as a savior of Hidden Rain Village and the Akatsuki. Jiraiya had misjudged, thinking Byakuya was exaggerating the truth. In reality, Byakuya's appearance was just misleading, compounded by his status as Hanzo's disciple, which led Jiraiya to mistake him. Soon after, Byakuya and Jiraiya returned to the delegation. Minato and Yahiko had already seen Byakuya's battle through the monitors, and their expressions were complex. Minato was worried about Byakuya's strength. Although the relationship between the village and Hidden Rain Village was currently good, Byakuya wasn't Jiraiya's student and could potentially become an enemy in the future. Additionally, There was Byakuya's heritage as a descendant of the Uzumaki clan. The Uzumaki clan held some resentment towards Hidden Leaf Village. On the other hand, Yahiko, apart from admiring Byakuya's enhanced strength, was concerned about his own abilities. When he first met Byakuya, Byakuya was merely a Geinin, while Yahiko was a Jounin. Now that Byakuya's combat skills were comparable to the 5 Kage while he was still a Jounin, Yahiko couldn't help but feel anxious about his own progress. Over the years, apart from making strides in management, Yahiko felt he had accomplished little in other areas. He worried that he might fall behind the Akatsuki's pace and become a burden. After this brief interlude, the delegation continued to observe the practical exercises. However, the recent upheaval left everyone somewhat distracted and less focused. In the Hokage Tower, the third Hokage had just ended his use of the telescope technique and turned to face Denzo. Initially, the third Hokage had little interest in Denzo's concerns about Byakuya. He had thought that Denzo merely wanted to obstruct the Hidden Leaf Village Hidden Rain Village exchange, combined with Denzo's deep-seated fear of Hanzo of the Salamander. Denzo's aversion to anyone associated with Hanzo had made Byakuya seem more significant in his eyes. But now, Byakuya's strength alone was enough for Denzo to take notice. He was clearly not just a talented young ninja. Denzo had definitely not told them the whole truth. The espionage activities in the Land of Rain 6 months ago were more complicated than they appeared. With his fingers drumming on the desk, the third Hokage asked sternly, "Denzo, just how much have you been hiding about the Akatsuki and Hidden Rain Village?" Denzo remained impassive, looking at the third Hokage with a cold expression. "Hiruzen, you are no longer the Hokage." At these words, the third Hokage's face darkened immediately. The two advisors also shifted their attention to Denzo, clearly eager to understand his actions. Under the collective gaze of the advisors, Denzo felt the pressure and began to reveal parts of his activities. When the third Hokage and the two advisors learned that Denzo had sent agents disguised as Hidden Stones village ninjas to cause disruption within the Land of Rain and had contacted Hanzo to eradicate the Akatsuki, their expressions changed dramatically. This was far from what they had anticipated. They had initially imagined that Hanzo valued Yahiko, Byakuya, and others and had thus cultivated them as successors. However, Denzo's account painted a different picture. The Akatsuki and Hidden Rain Village were already at odds, with significant internal conflicts. Denzo had exploited these conflicts, aiming to use Hanzo to eliminate the Akatsuki while weakening Hidden Rain Village's overall strength. Denzo's plan was not without merit. Weakening Hidden Rain Village aligned with Hidden Leaf Village's interests. However, the seemingly promising plan had failed. Not only had the Akatsuki been thrived, but they had also defeated Hanzo before becoming the new rulers of the Land of Rain. In other words, despite being an organization founded by Jiraiya's disciples, the Akatsuki now harbored significant resentment towards Hidden Leaf Village, having nearly been wiped out by Denzo's schemes. Denzo thought for a moment and chose to omit his collaboration with Byakuya. He solemnly emphasized, the Akatsuki's ability to replace Hanzo of the Salamander is largely due to Byakuya. We cannot afford to be careless. I recommend that during the delegation's stay in Hidden Leaf Village, my ninjas should monitor them. The third Hokage glanced at his old friend and shook his head lightly. Denzo, you cannot reappear. Doing so would affect the cooperation between our village and Hidden Rain Village. The reason Yahiko and the others have not mentioned this is out of old sentiments. If you were to go now, it would only worsen our relationship with Hidden Rain Village. Minato will not agree to this, and even if I intervene, it won't be possible. Also, what's the deal with the giant snake that appeared in the Forest of Death? What kind of experiments are you and Orochimaru conducting? I had instructed you to halt the wood-style experiments. Denzo's face darkened. I don't know exactly what Orochimaru is doing, but the failure of his bid for Hokage was a significant blow to him. He might be conducting experiments to pass the time. However, the experiments he's conducting definitely do not include human experiments. Upon hearing this, the third Hokage nodded. During his time in office, he had overseen a large-scale human experiment involving wood-style. To gain the first Hokage's power, many volunteers had eagerly signed up. Unfortunately, the chances of ordinary ninjas surviving the first Hokage's cells were less than 1 in 100. Even the few lucky ones died within a month. Since then, the wood-style experiments have become a taboo within the village. Recalling this, the third Hokage turned to the advisors and said, today's events must remain confidential. If Minato doesn't bring it up, we should keep it to ourselves? The two elder advisors neither agreed nor disagreed with the third Hokage's suggestion. What is most needed for an advisor is to stay neutral and keep quiet. After a few quiet sighs, the third Hokage looked out of the window at the view of Hidden Leaf Village. Unlike the Hokage's office, the advisor's office only offered a view of the thick tree trunks, with no sight of the newly blossomed Hidden Leaf Village. He began to miss the days when he was Hokage, when he didn't have to second-guess others' intentions. Chapter 125, The Contented Retired Elder. After finishing a day of accompanying duties, Jiraiya stretched and headed towards the streets of Hidden Leaf Village. He planned to enjoy a bowl of ikiraku ramen, relax with a bath, and gather material for his next manuscript. It was a way to indulge his physical needs while also giving back to his beloved readers. Unfortunately, readers didn't show much interest in the tale of the courageous ninja, preferring instead guides on local customs. This was a challenge for a middle-aged virgin like Jiraiya, who relied on fantasies to satisfy others' fantasies. When would he ever win Tsunada's heart? Not long after leaving, Jiraiya noticed Byakuya following behind. Clearing his throat, Jiraiya asked, "Byakuya-sama, why are you following me? Don't you need to return to the delegation?" Byakuya replied, "Jiraiya-sensei, I'm here for the appointment. You invited me this morning, didn't you?" Jiraiya was taken aback. "I was just being polite. I didn't expect you to actually come. I invited you to hang out, not to come along for real." After looking around, Jiraiya decided against turning Byakuya away. First, Byakuya was an important figure in the delegation. Second, if Byakuya caused trouble on the streets, it could lead to a messy situation. Realizing this, Jiraiya scratched his head and smiled. "I almost forgot. But you're still young, so there aren't many interesting places you can visit. I'll just show you around." Byakuya didn't comment on the ninja's restrictions on drinking and gambling. He followed Jiraiya, not for the pleasure-seeking activities but to see if he could trigger any special encounters. After all, Hidden Leaf Village wasn't exactly small, but it wasn't huge either. After wandering around, Jiraiya and Byakuya arrived at the famous ikiraku ramen. They sat down at the counter, and Jiraiya called out to the young owner, "2 super large bowls of ramen, please." The ramen shop owner was a young man in his 30s, with a daughter named Ayam who was only 4 or 5 years old. After receiving the order, he promptly began preparing the ramen. Byakuya glanced at the owner and the young Ayam and said with a hint of dissatisfaction, "Jiraiya-sensei, is this the best you can do for the envoy from Hidden Rain Village? The treatment seems pretty low. The ramen here costs 80 ryo per bowl. You don't plan to report it as 800, do you?" Byakuya added with a skeptical look. "Is reimbursement an option?" Jiraiya asked with a look of surprise as if he had just discovered a new world. "I thought I was paying out of my own pocket, which is why I brought you here." Seeing Jiraiya inadvertently reveal the truth, Byakuya maintained a serious tone and said, "Of course, foreign envoy expenses can be reimbursed. Not only can you report 80 ryo as 800, but reporting it as 8,000 is also quite common. Jiraiya-sensei, don't miss out on making some money." "Ah, I see." Jiraiya nodded slightly, curious. "Do you do this in Hidden Rain Village as well? Do you often overstate expenses?" Byakuya shook his head. "No, I'm the one responsible for cracking down on such activities. If someone needs to be dealt with, they are." Jiraiya suddenly lost interest in talking with Byakuya. He had thought he had discovered a lucrative trick, but it turned out Byakuya was just making a dry joke. At that moment, the third Hokage lifted the door curtain and sat down next to Byakuya. "You're absolutely right, Byakuya. When it comes to those who harm the village's interests, strict rules and punishments are necessary." "And you are?" Byakuya knew who the newcomer was but decided to ask anyway. "Just 1 bowl of ramen." The third Hokage first called out to the kitchen and then introduced himself. "I am the former Hokage of Hidden Leaf Village, Sarutobi Hiruzen. You can call me either Grandpa or Third Hokage." Byakuya ignored the third Hokage and turned to Jiraiya, saying, "Jiraiya-sensei, this old man is pretending to be the third Hokage. Isn't he your teacher? Aren't you going to do something about it?" Jiraiya looked helpless. "Byakuya-sama, this old man is indeed my teacher, the real deal third Hokage, not someone in disguise." Byakuya nodded, confused. "Then why does the real deal third Hokage want to see me? If it's about communication and cooperation, you should talk to Yahiko. He's the head of the delegation. I'm just an extra." The third Hokage did not answer Byakuya immediately but was puzzled by the terms of address used between Jiraiya and Byakuya. "Byakuya-sama and Jiraiya-sensei? This is quite confusing. There's at least a 20-year age difference between you two, and it's affecting your seniority." Seeing the third Hokage's confusion, Jiraiya explained, "Old man, Byakuya-sama is Hanzo's disciple." Upon hearing this, the third Hokage understood. Hanzo was indeed of a similar age to him, so the generational hierarchy was not incorrect from this perspective. Motioning for Jiraiya to step back, the third Hokage addressed Byakuya, "The matters of communication and cooperation are handled by the fourth Hokage. I'm already retired, just like you are a spare ninja. No wonder you have time to wander around. Byakuya muttered, then pointed to where Jiraiya had left and added, "Third Hokage, Jiraiya-sensei just ordered some food but didn't pay. Could you please take care of it?" At that moment, the ramen shop owner, holding a bowl of ramen, quickly said, "It's a good thing that the third Hokage and Jiraiya-sama are dining at my shop. There's no need to pay." "That's not possible." The third Hokage replied, feeling his pockets and pulling out a few bills. He placed them on the table and said, "Even as Hokage, one must pay for their meal. It's the village's rule." The shop owner glanced at the obviously insufficient amount of money, accepted it, and walked back to the kitchen. Byakuya watched this and thought to himself that the third Hokage was indeed quite stingy. He could either use his Hokage status to get the meal for free or pay the full amount for the ramen. Paying only part of it seemed like a kind of installment plan for the ramen. The third Hokage, however, was unconcerned with these details. Taking advantage of Byakuya eating his ramen, he began to ask, "Byakuya, what's your impression of Hidden Leaf Village?" As a former Hokage, the third Hokage's actions were still politically motivated. His intention in approaching Byakuya was to gauge his opinions and see if there was a way to align Byakuya with his interests. Byakuya continued eating his ramen and replied, "It's not bad but much better than other ninja villages." The third Hokage smiled faintly and then asked, "Can you tell me about the philosophy of your Akatsuki organization?" Byakuya set down his chopsticks and looked at the third Hokage. "Of course, but the way you're trying to probe for information is rather clumsy. If you want to gather intel about the delegation and Hidden Rain Village, you can just ask directly. There's no need for all this subterfuge." Chapter 126, Law-Abiding Byakuya. As a transmigrator, Byakuya was well acquainted with the third Hokage's life history. While people's thoughts might change over time, their general character usually remains consistent. In his impression, the third Hokage was mediocre and ineffective. If he had died during the three Shinobi World Wars, his reputation might have been better than the second Hokage's, making him a transitional figure. Unfortunately, the third Hokage lived too long, and Hidden Leaf Village, once vibrant, became stagnant under his leadership. It was easy to understand the third Hokage's intentions. He had probably learned something from Denzo and wanted to build a good relationship with Byakuya, hoping to use the Will of Fire to exert influence. But who was Byakuya again? Could the third Hokage's understanding of the Will of Fire match his own? After Byakuya exposed his intentions, the third Hokage looked slightly embarrassed. "I had no intention of probing the exchange group's information. I just wanted to chat with you, ask you to pass on my regards to Hanzo, and learn a bit about his life after retirement." "Oh, really?" Byakuya expressed doubt and asked skeptically. "After retiring, Hanzo-sensei has been fishing, practicing wellness, and training new recruits. Are you planning to follow his example, third Hokage? Fishing is out of the question." The third Hokage shook his head lightly and then began inquiring about other matters. However, Byakuya remained tight-lipped and didn't reveal any useful information. Thinking it over, it was within reason. Was a youth whom even Denzo feared just an ordinary ninja? However, the third Hokage was genuinely interested in the specifics of Hidden Rain Village situation, such as whether Hanzo the Salamander was still alive and if Byakuya knew about Denzo's activities. These pieces of information were crucial for the future cooperation and development between the two nations. After chatting for a while, the third Hokage brought up Jiraiya and Yahiko and eventually discussed their philosophies. The third Hokage elaborated on the Will of Fire and then looked at Byakuya, wanting to understand Hidden Rain Village's current philosophy and glimpse into its future path. However, after hearing about Akatsuki's ideology, the third Hokage's mouth twitched slightly. "Byakuya, what's the deal with Akatsuki's ideology?" Byakuya glanced at the third Hokage and responded, "Third Hokage, is there something wrong with our Akatsuki's ideology?" "It's not that." The third Hokage shook his head. The ideology of Akatsuki wasn't problematic per se, but it was almost identical to the Will of Fire, just expressed in a different way with some minor details changed. This made the third Hokage doubt whether Byakuya had just made up Akatsuki's ideology on the spot. Seemingly sensing the third Hokage's thoughts, Byakuya sighed and said, "Third Hokage, you're probably questioning the authenticity of Akatsuki's ideology. It was developed by me and Yahiko, incorporating some aspects of the Will of Fire. Please don't mind." Upon hearing this, the third Hokage's expression softened considerably. The fact that the Will of Fire can be embraced by others is a good thing. "I'm quite pleased about it," said the third Hokage. He didn't mind the Will of Fire being adopted by others. In a way, it meant that other ninja villages were natural allies of Hidden Leaf Village. He believed that a ninja who loved the Will of Fire would not stray from the right path. This made it possible that Hidden Leaf Village and Hidden Rain Village could indeed become allies, working together against the remaining major ninja villages of Hidden Stones Village and Hidden Clouds Village. After a pause, the third Hokage curiously asked, "But Byakuya, why are you interested in the Will of Fire?" The third Hokage had already formulated an answer in his mind before asking the question. Jiraiya was his disciple, and Yahiko was Jiraiya's disciple. Since Byakuya had spent a lot of time with Yahiko and others, he must have been influenced by the Will of Fire and unconsciously adopted Hidden Leaf Village's ideals. At this point, Byakuya fell into contemplation, thinking about how to respond. Ultimately, Byakuya chose to stay true to his persona and replied with a somber expression, "I'm not sure. Before meeting Yahiko, I think I had heard about the Will of Fire from my parents. Unfortunately, they went missing a long time ago. In the ninja world, missing often meant death." Upon hearing about Byakuya's missing parents, the third Hokage grew curious about his background. The ninja world was full of orphans. Jiraiya and Orochimaru were orphans, and Yahiko and his friends, as well as Byakuya, were all war orphans. Nobody cared much about their past identities. But Byakuya's case was different. His background might be quite unusual. The reason was simple: Yahiko and his friends had achieved Chunin status through Jiraiya's teachings. But Byakuya, who had only recently become Hanzo's disciple, had never undergone systematic training and was a few years younger than them. His elite Jonin strength was questionable. Either he had met a renowned teacher in his youth who laid a strong foundation, or he possessed an exceptionally strong ninja lineage or even a formidable bloodline limit. Otherwise, for a ninja of his age, reaching Chunin level would already be impressive. But Byakuya had never used any KK Genkai, and his hair and eye color were both black, showing no signs of anything special. What if he had Senjutsu Uchiha blood? The third Hokage seemed to have an epiphany. Looking at Byakuya again, he began to show more goodwill. "Past matters are past. You can share some of your childhood memories. Although I have retired from the Hokage position, I am still familiar with events from these past decades. I might be able to help you find something." "No need. I think they're probably dead," Byakuya said, shaking his head and politely declining the third Hokage's offer. He then smiled and added, "I've found a new home. Although we don't share blood, we're no different from a real family." Byakuya then turned to the old man, "Third Hokage, you also have trusted family and companions, don't you?" The third Hokage nodded slightly, picturing the lively scenes of the Sarutobi family in his mind. His family was indeed very happy. His wife, Biwako, loved him dearly, and his eldest son held an important position in the Anbu and was preparing to marry. The only thorn in his side was his rebellious youngest son, who was always out making trouble for him. After a moment of reflection, the third Hokage said gently, "I'm glad you've found a place where you belong. However, I hope that you and your friends will consider returning to Hidden Leaf Village. Hidden Leaf Village welcomes you." Upon hearing the third Hokage's invitation, Byakuya was momentarily taken aback. It seemed that the third Hokage was considering the possibility of acquiring Hidden Rain Village. However, Hidden Rain Village was part of Akatsuki, making it impossible for Hidden Leaf Village to acquire. Nevertheless, the third Hokage's attitude had shifted significantly, indicating he was starting to suspect Byakuya's background. It was uncertain what kind of background the third Hokage might have imagined for him. After starting with probing questions and moving to recent events, the third Hokage eventually finished his large bowls of ramen and prepared to leave. He planned to return and continue suppressing Denzo, ensuring that Denzo's activities were curbed. The information Denzo had about Byakuya was likely just an excuse, claims about Byakuya's subordinates being killed by Akatsuki or Byakuya being the dark side of Akatsuki. Denzo was simply reluctant to let go of his power and was hiding his true strength. Byakuya had only experienced pain and thus was cautious about the world, unwilling to let anyone harm his companions. He was no real threat. Moreover, Byakuya's background was highly suspicious and seemed deeply connected with the village. The third Hokage didn't believe that such a young genius could suddenly emerge from the corners of the ninja world. Hidden Leaf Village had its share of talented young ninjas with black hair. Watching the third Hokage leave, Byakuya finished his ramen and left a kairaku ramen. As he passed by the Hidden Leaf Village bathhouse, Byakuya spotted Jiraiya, who was using ninjutsu to peek into the bathhouse. After confirming Jiraiya's presence and realizing that he hadn't noticed him, Byakuya approached a patrolling member of the Uchiha police force. The Uchiha patrol member was one of those captured previously. Upon seeing Byakuya, he became alert, aware of Byakuya's strength and destructive capabilities. Byakuya greeted him with a friendly smile, explaining he wasn't there to cause trouble but to report something. Approaching the Uchiha officer, Byakuya patted him on the shoulder and said, "I'm a guest of Hidden Leaf Village and don't usually get involved in things like this, but I just witnessed something illegal." Do you accept reports? The patrol member, still wary, replied, of course, what's the issue? Byakuya pointed toward the bathhouse and said, I'm reporting that a ninja is spying on the bathhouse. I trust the Uchiha will handle this properly. Please check it out. The patrol member was taken aback but quickly led his team towards the bathhouse. Soon, sounds of commotion could be heard. The Uchiha patrol surrounded Jiraiya, who had been caught peeking. After a few stern warnings, the staff at the bathhouse noticed the commotion and came out to see what was happening. Disguised as a different person, Jiraiya's face darkened. Despite his best efforts to hide, he had been discovered. As he was surrounded and reprimanded, Jiraiya tried to resist but feared exposure. After enduring a beating from the Uchiha patrol, Jiraiya used the substitution technique to escape when faced with handcuffs from the patrol. If he were actually taken to the police station and then bailed out by Minato the next day, Jiraiya's reputation would be severely tarnished. Chapter 127, Denzo-senpai, please do your best. Seeing Jiraiya's predicament, Byakuya couldn't help but smile faintly. Jiraiya, who had promised to treat him to a meal, ended up sneaking away midway, which was a clear breach of brotherly loyalty. Even if it was just a pretense of brotherhood, he should have paid up. But that was Jiraiya for you, always pulling little tricks, but when it came to crucial moments, he was exceptionally reliable. Byakuya recalled how Jiraiya had once tricked Naruto out of his allowance, yet he had boldly ventured into Hidden Rain Village alone during a crisis in Hidden Leaf Village. Normally, he could have leveraged the power of the three ninjas and indulged in numerous affairs, but he chose to openly peek and accept the consequences rather than use his ninja techniques to resist. In the harsh reality of the ninja world, Jiraiya seemed somewhat endearing, almost like a simple-hearted good person. Unfortunately, the ninja world could accommodate both good and bad people but had little room for pure-hearted individuals. Unless one had a Hokage as a father and a sage as godfather. Pulling his wandering thoughts back, Byakuya formed a series of hand seals and used the shadow clone jutsu to leave a clone behind. Byakuya then moved toward the direction of his lodging. As he completed these tasks, Byakuya glanced toward the depths of the alley. He had noticed the Anbu member trailing him right after the third Hokage left. This Anbu member was clearly not part of Minato Namikage's direct team but rather one of Denzo's subordinates, the bug user Ryuma. Upon seeing Ryuma, Byakuya greeted him with a neutral expression, long time no see, Ryuma. Did Denzo-senpai send you to find me? Denzo-sama has business with you, Byakuya-sama, but I'm not clear on the specifics. Ryuma replied. Ryuma nodded slightly. Though he was a high-ranking member of Root, he couldn't be tough in front of Byakuya. He was well aware of Byakuya's strength and capability, a powerful figure who had turned the tide of battle and defeated a demigod of the ninja world to secure Hidden Rain Village. In terms of power, Byakuya was comparable to the leaders of the 5 great shinobi villages. Following Ryuma, Byakuya evaded the patrolling guards and, after passing through the Hidden Leaf Village barrier, arrived at a secluded shrine outside the village. This shrine, located in a remote area, was actually one of Root's bases. Upon arrival, Byakuya's gaze fell on 2 figures in the open area. One was Denzo, whom he had seen before, and the other was likely Orochimaru, one of the 3 great senins. During this period, Orochimaru had achieved great feats but, like Ryuma, was Denzo's subordinate. Despite similar titles, their strengths and statuses were quite different. Ryuma was an elite jonin who could be countered, while Orochimaru had reached the level of Kage, though not at his peak strength like that in anime. Nevertheless, he was still a formidable opponent. Recalling the giant snake attack he had faced earlier in the day, Byakuya's alertness intensified. If Denzo and Orochimaru decided to team up against him now, he would have no choice but to reveal his full strength to confront them. Observing Orochimaru, Byakuya realized that Orochimaru was also watching him closely. When Byakuya had first met the envoy team, Orochimaru had almost overlooked this seemingly ordinary young man, had it not been for Denzo's prior warning. However, the events of the afternoon, where Byakuya had swiftly killed one of Orochimaru's modified summoning beasts, had piqued his interest. Orochimaru was now eager to delve into Byakuya's makeup. After sizing each other up, Byakuya approached Denzo with a smile and said, Denzo-senpai, are you planning to take action against the 4th Hokage this time? Unfortunately, I can't help with the Flying Thunder God technique, you'll need to find someone else. Upon hearing this, Ryuma immediately stepped away. Orochimaru, meanwhile, looked thoughtfully at Byakuya and Denzo, and said with interest, Denzo, are you really planning to team up with outsiders to deal with Minato? The old man won't agree to that. Denzo's expression shifted slightly. He knew both were scheming against him, but he could only stiffen his resolve and say, I have no intention of becoming Hokage for now. This invitation to Byakuya was primarily to discuss a possible cooperation. Cooperation? Byakuya's eyes twitched. I'm not inclined to cooperate with you, Denzo-senpai. The last time I trusted you for a collaboration, you ended up killing Hanzo's envoy and pinned the blame on me. If it weren't for my luck, I might have died in Hidden Rain Village. You knew? Denzo's face darkened. He had thought his frame-up of Byakuya was foolproof, but Byakuya's tone indicated that the plot had been exposed. This made Denzo realize he might have been manipulated by Byakuya. When I sent Hanzo-sensei into retirement, I guessed as much. However, both Hanzo-sensei and you underestimated the strength of the Akatsuki, which allowed me to secure Hidden Rain Village easily. Orochimaru, listening to the conversation between Byakuya and Denzo, narrowed his eyes thoughtfully. He extracted useful information from their exchange, such as Byakuya's previous cooperation with Denzo and the current state of Hanzo, who was now in retirement. The term retirement was particularly intriguing, whether it meant confinement in a secret prison or if Hanzo had been directly eliminated by Byakuya. After a pause, Byakuya continued, let's not dwell on the past. Denzo-senpai, could you explain the details of the cooperation? If there's nothing else, I'll be on my way. Seeing this, Denzo quickly explained, Byakuya, I want to enlist your help against Hidden Grass Village. The Hidden Grass Village's high-ranking officials have recently been leaning towards an alliance with Hidden Stones Village. If they form an alliance, it would not be favorable for us. You want to take down Hidden Grass Village? I'm not particularly interested in that. Byakuya displayed a lack of enthusiasm and added, however, if Denzo-senpai is planning a coup, I'd be ready to support you at any time. I have already said, I have no intention of staging a coup. Denzo's words were firm, but Byakuya could sense the underlying tension. The conversation revealed a lot about the power dynamics and the various schemes at play. Denzo's intentions were far from transparent, and Byakuya's indifference toward the Hidden Grass Village plan only highlighted his strategic detachment. Denzo repeatedly explained that he wasn't sure why Byakuya always suspected him of wanting to stage a coup, especially since he had shared numerous power-seizing plans with Byakuya. I just thought Denzo-senpai had such intentions. Byakuya gave a non-committal response, then continued, but I won't be involved in these schemes. I'm now the heir apparent to the next Hidden Rain Village leader and no longer wish to return to the shadows. If Denzo-senpai wants to bask in the sunlight, please make sure to initiate your military coup soon. The longer you delay, the only position left for you might be the 6th Hokage. With that, Byakuya turned on his heel and left, leaving Denzo fuming in his place. Chapter 128, a new ability. Hearing Byakuya's blatant mockery, Denzo clenched his fists but could only stare intensely at Byakuya's back. Byakuya knew very well that Denzo wanted to become the Hokage, but Byakuya constantly used this to taunt him, rubbing salt into his wounds repeatedly, even going so far as to encourage him to launch a military coup. Denzo admitted that when he first heard Byakuya was willing to assist him in a coup, he was somewhat tempted. But such actions, while easy to talk about, are incredibly difficult to accomplish. With his current strength, let alone dealing with all the village's ninjas, even facing Hiruzen alone would be extremely challenging. As for secretly seeking allies, that was out of the question. Byakuya's promises were not to be trusted. If word got out that he was colluding with ninjas from other villages, he might not even be able to keep his position as a senior advisor. As for Orochimaru, he was also highly unreliable and could very well betray him at any moment. Thinking of this, Denzo looked at Orochimaru beside him and slowly said, Orochimaru, weren't you quite interested in Byakuya? Why didn't you make a move to keep him just now? Orochimaru glanced at Denzo and then said, Lord Denzo, why didn't you make a move yourself? If you had struck first, I would have certainly gone to support you. Besides, during the day, I already gathered enough information. Byakuya is definitely not the kind of ninja that can be easily taken down. I suspect that the one who came here was just a clone, and the real body is probably still with the exchange delegation. If we had really made a move, it would have been difficult to clean up the mess. Hearing these words, Denzo's face showed a hint of displeasure, but he still accepted Orochimaru's reasoning. He knew it would have been pointless, but he still needed to vent his frustration. After all, nothing had gone his way since last year. Failing to become Hokage and facing the disbanding crisis of the Root Division was bad enough, but Byakuya even went out of his way to provoke his fragile nerves. Wasn't he afraid that they would completely fall out? However, this time inviting Byakuya over wasn't entirely without gain. At least he learned that Hidden Rain Village had no immediate plans to attack the Land of Grass. The Land of Grass is a crucial strategic point for Hidden Leaf Village since by controlling its leadership, they could curb the expansion of the Land of Wind, Earth, and Rain. But, while Denzo was deep in thought, Orochimaru's gaze was fixed on the distance. Although he didn't make a move against Byakuya, he was extremely interested in Byakuya's body. What kind of ninjutsu had he learned, and what kind of bloodline did he possess? How could he have the strength to defeat Hanzo of the Salamander at such a young age? Unfortunately, the one who came this time was just a shadow clone. If it had been the real body, Orochimaru might not have been able to resist making a move, but there would be other opportunities in the future. Seemingly sensing Orochimaru's gaze, Byakuya, in the distance, turned to glance at the root base. From the moment he accepted the invitation, Byakuya never intended to make any deals with Denzo. Ninjas like Denzo are simply delusional as companions but can become excellent enemies. As long as he would continue to bring up the matter of the coup, Denzo would eventually strike against Hidden Leaf Village's ninjas. Perhaps in Hidden Leaf Village's prime, the idea of a coup would have been completely suppressed, but once Hidden Leaf Village enters a period of decline, everything will change. And it seems that Orochimaru has also taken an interest in him. Should he find an opportunity to reveal his wood style? After pondering for a moment, Byakuya returned to the exchange delegation's residence. After casually chatting with Yahiko and Conan about the day's events, Byakuya began to perform the summoning jutsu to work remotely. During the days that he and Yahiko and Conan had been away, quite a bit of government work had piled up in the village. Although his wood clone had been diligently handling it, its efficiency was certainly not on par with Yahiko's. Yahiko was a workaholic, practically living in the office of Hidden Rain Village. He didn't mind that his strength in the core group was inferior to Nagato's or Conan's, but even Karen was surpassing him. Sometimes, he wondered if Yahiko could even defeat a special Jonin anymore, but this was the price of being the leader of a ninja village. Staying in a comfortable environment for long periods dulls one's sharp senses, which is detrimental to compatibility. Seeing Byakuya working remotely, Yahiko paused for a moment but then began to take over the work. Byakuya, you always have good ideas. Can you lend me one? Yahiko was also concerned about the village. The basic infrastructure and educational reforms required strict supervision or, there was a high risk of corner cutting. This kind of thing was almost a norm during Hanzo's time, but the situation improved significantly after Byakuya sent a few Jonin to the Pure Land for retirement. In response to Yahiko's praise, Byakuya nodded lightly, only urging him to quickly handle the work. At the same time, he mentioned a few things about remote communication, hoping to promote it within Hidden Rain Village. The remote communication method Byakuya mentioned was, of course, not the dendenmushi but the laying of proper communication lines. From what he had learned about the ninja world over the past year, the chakra technology in the ninja world is not weak. Not only do they have technological products like refrigerators and computers, but also modern weapons like pistols and cannons. The reason they haven't been widely used in wars is actually due to the presence of ninjas. Ninjas are simply too fast. Although they can outrun bullets, they can move faster than the aiming of a gun, and various ninjutsu and ganjutsu make them difficult to defend against. The method of using artillery for widespread destruction is also countered by the deployment patterns of ninja teams. And most importantly, the cost of modern weapons is far higher than that of training ninjas. And communication methods like telephones had already appeared within the ninja villages, but due to years of war, basic infrastructure couldn't be developed. Currently, it's likely that only Hidden Rain Village has the conditions to implement this. However, the Akatsuki organization has its own ultra-long-distance communication method, the projection jutsu. As long as there are Rinnegan and the demonic statue of the outer path, a remote communication system can be established. In the original timeline, the Akatsuki relied on this ability to communicate across the ninja world. Unfortunately, Nagato has not yet attempted to summon the demonic statue of the outer path. Just then, an electronic notification sounded in Byakuya's ear. Nagato's strength has been upgraded to Kage level. You have acquired puppet manipulation jutsu, and gained the human path, hell path, and animal path abilities. Hearing the system notification, Byakuya secretly muttered to himself, what a coincidence. However, it wasn't surprising, as his wood clone had been guiding Nagato in creating the 6 paths of pain these past few days. It made sense that the 6 paths of pain would be completed around this time. After all, the 6 paths of pain are essentially just 6 puppets, created to maximize the abilities of the Rinnegan. They greatly enhance Nagato's strength. After all, Nagato's combat aptitude is difficult to assess. Although he didn't lose his legs to explosive tags this time, he still hasn't fully maximized the abilities of the Rinnegan. The 6 paths of pain also have the abilities of resurrection and immunity to death, which Nagato's true body does not possess. Still, isn't a Kage level evaluation of Nagato's strength a bit too low? After all, he does possess the Rinnegan. Chapter 129, Hidden Leaf Village Hospital. After finding an excuse to slack off, Byakuya went to his room to claim his rewards. This time, the rewards included puppet creation jutsu, as well as the abilities of the human path, animal path, and hell path. The puppet creation jutsu needs no explanation, it allowed him to master the technique for creating the 6 paths of pain. The human path's ability is to extract souls and read memories. The animal path grants the ability to summon and control a large number of beasts, while the hell path provides the ability to revive puppets. These abilities align with the direction in which Nagato's strength is increasing, but for Byakuya, they seemed somewhat redundant. With Nagato around, there was no need for him to create the 6 paths of pain himself. At that moment, Byakuya received intelligence from his wood clone. The report was brief, with only a few words and one significant piece of news. Nagato had already summoned the body of the Tentails, the demonic statue of the outer path, a crucial element for the Eye of the Moon plan. After digesting this important information, Byakuya stood up and went to the balcony, looking in the direction of the Hokage's office. The abilities he had just acquired weren't entirely useless, at least they could be used to lay the groundwork for some plans against Hidden Leaf Village. Hidden Leaf Village was too powerful, backed by a population of over 100 million, with thousands of combat-ready ninjas in the village. If Hidden Leaf Village could not be plunged into internal chaos, there would be no hope for the Land of Rain. Time quickly moved to the 3rd day. Today, the Hidden Rain Village delegation was scheduled to visit Hidden Leaf Village Hospital. Upon entering Hidden Leaf Village Hospital, Byakuya, Yahiko, and the others saw the historical introduction of the hospital. Like the Ninja Academy, Hidden Leaf Village was the first ninja village to establish a medical institution. It was also the first to implement medical reforms and establish the 3 principles of medical ninjas. The first principle, a medical ninja must never give up on a comrade before they die. The second principle, a medical ninja must never stand on the front lines of battle. The third principle, a medical ninja must never die before the rest of their team, they are the ones most in need of protection. Neither Yahiko nor Conan had any objections to these 3 principles, and Byakuya had little to say about them either. The medical ninja in a squad is indeed the most crucial member. But even more than 10 years later, Hidden Leaf Village had still not managed to assign a medical ninja to every squad. The number of medical ninjas in the ninja world is too scarce, and Hidden Rain Village has only a handful of them, far from meeting the demands of war, and even in peacetime, they are stretched thin. However, Hidden Rain Village had so far relied on the core combat strength of a few individuals. In the short term, they had no plans for external expansion and could only continue trying to recruit talent in the ninja world. Doctors don't necessarily need to be ninjas to fulfill their roles. After exchanging a glance, Byakuya and Yahiko understood each other's thoughts and entered a state of serious observation. The methods Hidden Leaf Village used to train medical ninjas, along with their teaching methods and evaluation criteria, were all worth learning from. They needed to find a way to bring these practices to Hidden Rain Village, where they could be studied and improved upon. Seeing this, Minato smiled warmly. The more interest Yahiko and his group show in Hidden Leaf Village, the greater the likelihood of forming an alliance with them in the future. Although Hidden Leaf Village has already forged alliances with Hidden Sand Village and several smaller nations, Hidden Sand Village's alliance was more out of necessity, and the smaller nations are fickle and unreliable. If Hidden Leaf Village could establish an alliance with Hidden Rain Village, it would secure a stable ally, reducing the chances of another war and preventing Hidden Leaf Village from being caught off guard, as it had been in previous Ninja World Wars. At this moment, Jiraiya walked into the middle of the delegation, catching the attention of Minato and the others. Jiraiya's appearance was rather alarming, deep dark circles under his eyes and a face that looked bruised, as if he had been beaten up. Jiraiya-sensei, what happened to you? Minato asked with concern. It's nothing. I just accidentally tripped on my way home last night. Jiraiya replied, unwilling to tell his student the truth. However, his eyes couldn't help but glance toward Byakuya in the distance. Does it have something to do with Byakuya? Minato frowned slightly and then said, Jiraiya-sensei, I'll have someone check last night's surveillance footage to see what really happened. Hearing this, Jiraiya quickly waved his hands and explained, yesterday, I agreed to invite Byakuya to dinner, right? But halfway through the meal, the old man came over to chat with Byakuya, so I took the opportunity to leave. Byakuya then got back at me because I didn't pay for the meal. How did he get back at you? Minato asked curiously. Well, Jiraiya hesitated, then said, I was gathering material when Byakuya caught me. He immediately reported me to the police force. Minato guessed what had happened and looked at Jiraiya with a mix of amusement and exasperation. Jiraiya-sensei, Byakuya is still just a kid, and your hobbies are, well, not exactly easy for people to accept, so I'm afraid I can't really help you with this. Jiraiya blushed and replied, Minato, you're the one who kept asking. Minato smiled, saying, I had no idea the situation between you and Byakuya was so entertaining. And yesterday, when he called you Jiraiya-sensei, you actually responded. Keeping up with the younger generation helps you stay young? Jiraiya said, then added offhandedly, I wonder what Byakuya and the old man were talking about. Could Byakuya be connected to the village in some way? Minato nodded and revealed Byakuya's background. Jiraiya-sensei, Byakuya does have some connection to the village. One of his parents was a member of the Uzumaki clan, making him a distant relative of both Kushina and Nagato. Byakuya possesses the Uzumaki bloodline. Jiraiya's eyes widened in surprise. His first reaction was disbelief, but after thinking it over, it started to make sense. Byakuya had approached Nagato because Nagato was an Uzumaki ninja, but why hadn't Byakuya directly allied with Hidden Leaf Village? After all, Kushina was also a descendant of the Uzumaki clan. Noticing Jiraiya's thoughts, Minato no Mikaze quietly lowered his gaze. That's what worries me. Not all Uzumaki ninjas are willing to accept the village.